Hello, friends. Tonight we sink into a waterlogged realm where the heavens appear intent on unloading every last cloud directly onto your back. You arrive in 1315, and the atmosphere transforms instantly, thicker, sodden, as though a coarse wool cloak has been plunged into a rushing stream and then wrapped around your frame. You can practically hear the ceaseless patter of raindrops gliding from steeply pitched roofs of straw and plopping into the churned-up mire just beyond the threshold. As the marshy ground fully envelops you, let the quiet dawn unfold at its own unhurried pace, serene and free from any nagging concern. Before you settle in fully, pause to tap that like button and hit subscribe only if the journey truly resonates with you. And if you're curled up now with a steaming mug in hand, drop your city and current hour in the comments. I'm always curious about the corners of the world tuning in. Lower the lights, ease into the tale. The downpour is already softening the edges for you.
You slog along a slender lane between hovels, each footfall producing a muted glug as your leather boots disappear into what was, mere weeks ago, firm soil. This deluge is no fleeting guest. It has camped here for months, perhaps longer. Memories blur on the precise day the ordinary spring showers twisted into something malevolent. The sun is reduced to a pale, indistinct smear behind an impenetrable veil of slate. It radiates nothing. You tilt your face skyward now and then, searching for the faintest rift, yet the firmament merely looms, bloated and ominous, as if poised to rupture entirely. The arable strips that should be swelling with midsummer bounty lie devastated. Passing one, you note the wheat stalks bent at grotesque angles, half submerged in glassy pools. Certain swaths resemble flooded paddies from distant Cathay, though no villager has ever sown rice. A well-documented chronicle surfaces in your thoughts. Monastic scribes across Flanders, England, and the Rhineland recorded 1315 as harboring the most unrelenting precipitation within generational recall, saturating the continent from the Baltic to the Bay of Biscay for 2 full growing seasons. Brushing your palm across the sodden grain heads, you can almost hear those ink-stained monks issuing cautions that went unheeded amid the daily struggle. A pervasive mustiness saturates the air, not the acrid tang of swift putrefaction, but a muted, loamy odor born of vegetation suffocating in stagnant water. The earth beneath your soles seems to sigh, releasing trapped moisture with every step. Villagers move with deliberate caution, chins tucked against the perpetual mist, as though an extra fold of hood or a bowed posture might negotiate a truce with the sky's foul temper. Inside the low-ceilinged homes, relief is illusory. You shoulder open a warped oak plank door and enter a gloom where hearth smoke has mingled with airborne damp until the room feels like breathing broth. A woman crouches over the fire pit, coaxing reluctant kindling. Each struck flint yields only a hiss of vapor. The wattle and daub walls glisten darkly, exuding a chill that seeps into bone. The pallet of straw in the corner sags under its own weight, having drunk deeply from leaks overhead. Fresh rushes strewn across the packed earth floor absorb footprints of mud within minutes. An odd domestic detail floats up from medieval household accounts. Families often suspended loaves from the rafters on twine, gambling that rising smoke would stave off mold longer than any shelf.
Glancing upward, you spot several misshapen rye rounds swaying like tiny forlorn pendulums, less drying than marinating in a haze of peat and humidity. You wonder whether they will still be palatable come Sunday Mass. Likely not, yet hope keeps them aloft. Stepping back into the lane, you let the acoustic tapestry envelop you. Rain drumming on thatch in uneven rhythms, water gurgling along eaves troughs carved from hollowed logs, droplets pinging off upturned iron cauldrons abandoned in the downpour. The settlement has become a vast percussion ensemble of leakage. Hens cluster beneath overhangs, plumage fluffed into sodden spheres. A shaggy hound coils in a doorway, nose buried beneath its tail, fixing you with a gaze that conveys centuries of shared resignation. Fauna and folk alike sense this is no mere inclement spell. Knots of neighbors huddled beneath dripping awnings, murmuring about the drowned acreage. A few insist similar inundations struck in their grandfather's youth, though dates dissolve in oral tradition.
Modern paleoclimatology offers sharper context. Tree ring data from Scandinavian pines and speleothems in Belgian caves reveal an abrupt cooling spike around 1310 to 1320, possibly triggered by a cluster of equatorial eruptions, perhaps the 1313 blast of Tarumai in Japan, or unrecorded events in the Ring of Fire, lofting sulfate aerosols that dimmed incoming sunlight by up to 1.5% for nearly a decade. You draw your hooded mantle closer, reflecting that these mud-caked souls have no inkling they stand at the precipice of what posterity will label the Great Famine's opening act. A tenant farmer limps toward you, a splintered mattock balanced across his shoulder like a yoke of defeat. Rainwater streams from his matted beard. His homespun tunic adheres to his frame as if painted on with glue. In a voice scraped raw by wind and worry, he explains how he spent 3 dawns hacking shallow trenches to bleed water from his barley plot.
You incline your head in quiet acknowledgement, already foreseeing the inevitable conclusion. Those hastily carved ditches brimmed over within hours. The water simply pooled, stubborn and unmoved, transforming the entire plot into a shallow lake. The farmer lifts one shoulder in a gesture of weary surrender, yet his gaze betrays a tremor of dread. That same dread lurks everywhere, camouflaged behind murmured salutations and forced small talk, like a shadow stitched to every heel. You drift toward the settlement's fringe, where gentle slopes ought to promise drainage and respite. Instead, you confront denuded hillsides, their faces sloughing away in viscous sheets. Saturated earth detaches in deliberate gluey surges, engulfing hedgerows and outbuildings alike. A modest goat enclosure has migrated a third of the way down the incline, an impromptu avalanche of mud. Its hazel wattle uprights jut at drunken angles. The turf roof has pancaked inward, trapping a faint bleat beneath. You linger, allowing the damp gusts to plaster sodden locks against your skin. The terrain itself seems exhausted, overburdened, and swollen past endurance.
As you advance, another shift registers. The deluge has altered human scent as thoroughly as it has the soil. Garments sprout pale constellations of mildew. Footwear exhales the fetid breath of marsh bottoms. Hair lies plastered to scalps in lank, faintly fermented ropes. You glimpse neighbors clawing at inflamed patches where prolonged moisture has kindled angry rashes. Intertrigo, the physicians of Paris would later term it. Matrons confer in low tones about poultices of dried yarrow or betony, but their gathered herbs hang limp and waterlogged in the rafters, essential oils leached away. Dusk arrives prematurely beneath the oppressive canopy. The transition is subtle. Clouds deepen from pewter to charcoal, and a sharper chill gnaws at knuckles and earlobes. shutters groan shut with the fatigue of ritual repetition. Inside, tallow dips hiss and gutter, wicks drowning in their own runoff. Shadows elongate across trodden clay like wary specters. Beyond the threshold, silence reigns, save for the omnipresent percussion of rainfall, now as familiar as a heartbeat.
You lower yourself onto a three-legged stool, feeling a sly draft snake through a fissure in the daub. For a moment, you envision the whole of Christendom swaddled in the same sodden shroud. Eyes drifting shut, you detect the first tender roots of panic taking hold. If the tilth cannot exhale, no seed will ripen. If the crop perishes, existence itself frays to a threadbare gamble. Dawn returns in the same washed-out monotone. The atmosphere has thickened overnight, as though darkness distilled an extra stratum of vapor onto every surface. Your mantle, heavy as chainmail, molds itself to your torso with a clammy insistence that whispers of permanent saturation. Emerging, the mire greets each stride with a reluctant, viscous kiss before releasing your soul. You draw measured breaths, savoring the fragile hush of pre-dawn. Precipitation has paused, yet the firmament remains turgid, pregnant with threat, a crossbow rewound. You pass a squat forge where a bay gelding stands hitched beneath a drooping pentis. Its ribs etch faint parentheses beneath the lusterless hide. The smith traces the outline with calloused fingers, grumbling about the soaring price of oats. His smile is a brittle mask, eyes hollow. Livestock, too, register the turning tide, the restless stamp of hoofs, the anxious flick of ears amid the metallic clink of rain on discarded plowshares. A canonical datum surfaces as the hamlet stirs. Monastic cartularies and manorial rolls from Liège to Lincolnshire note grain quotations doubling, then tripling, within a single lunar month of the inundations. Wheat, staff of life, currency of the peasant, ascends to the status of guarded relic. You observe the truth enacted at a nearby threshold. A matriarch parcels rye flour with the solemnity of an apothecary dispensing a lectuary. Her children hover, pupils wide as communion wafers, each hoping for an errant grain. She keeps her gaze fixed on the scales, unwilling to meet theirs. Indulgence would bankrupt tomorrow. Further along, a granary should exhale the honest perfume of plenty. Instead, a faint, cellar-like staleness seeps through the planks. Evidence that last year's meager surplus has been consolidated. Sacks, huddled like conspirators around an ever-dwindling core. Your palm encounters a stave barrel. The oak has bellied outward from cyclic wetting, and a hairline fracture now weeps a slow, amber tear of seepage. A thumb-sized plug of beeswax has been jammed into the stave's fissure, a desperate caulking that already beads with runoff. A curious footnote surfaces from manorial court rolls. When rye and wheat failed, tenants in the Low Countries in the Ile-de-France stripped the chaff from oats, winnowed it twice, and ground the husks into a coarse gruel they called halm meal. Others boiled goosefoot and fat hen, plants once tossed to swine, until the leaves collapsed into a bitter, fibrous paste. You can almost feel the grit lodging between molars, the acrid aftertaste that no amount of well water could rinse away. Hunger redraws boundaries the way floodwater redraws riverbanks. Drifting toward the crossroads, you catch the low thrum of voices. Most still bargain with the heavens aloud. It must break soon. St. Swithin's day is past. The barley only needs 10 dry days. The words are half prayer, half dare. Yet posture betrays them. Shoulders rounded as if carrying invisible yoke, feet shuffling rather than striding. A stripling hauls a hemp sack that slumps like a half-filled corpse. He loosens the neck for his elder to peer in. The grain inside is wizened, mottled violet and gray,
some kernels already sprouting pale, suicidal roots. The young man exhales a sound too ancient for his lungs. Both men dart glances left and right before leaning in, as though naming the rot might summon worse. Scholars still wrangle over apportioning blame. Was the catastrophe primarily meteorological, persistent North Atlantic blocking patterns, or structural, open field systems with no fallow reserves, rents fixed in cash rather than kind, granaries already depleted by the 13-14 harvest shortfall? Here the question is lived, not debated. A single failed sowing can shear the thread that ties Villan to lord, baker to miller, child to cradle. Inside a turf-walled dwelling, an elderly pair confer in murmurs. The wife tallies rashers of bacon on her fingers. 3 thumb lengths remain, cured the previous Michaelmas. The last hog yielded pale flesh, runny as curds, she says, twisting her apron until the weave creases white. Her husband stares at the hearth, afraid to meet eyes that mirror his own dread.
Fear arrives without ceremony, the way fog seeps beneath the ill-hung door. By noon the sky exhales again, first a courteous sprinkle, then a measured drumming that swells into resolve. You lift your chin. Droplets collect on lashes like tiny lenses, magnifying the gray. Once this would have tasted of spring, now it tastes of postponement. The forge you passed earlier reappears, the same gaunt mare, ribs etching deeper parentheses, coat dulled to the color of wet ash. The smith's palm slides along her flank, calculating hay at 4p the truss, double last month's rate. His grin is a rictus that never climbs to the eyes. The green lies abandoned, its turf spongy and treacherous. Foot traffic has carved new ruts. Puddles reflect the sky's refusal to brighten. Villagers husband strength the way misers hoard farthings. Every unnecessary step is a calorie taxed. Inside a low-beamed hall, 5 adults ring a deal table bare of bowls. Conversation loops like a rosary. A peddler from St.
Omer demands 2 silver pennies per modius of peas. A hamlet 3 leagues east has begun slaughtering breeding sows. Someone swears the Flemings are distilling acorns into spirit. The skeptic among them scoffs, yet her knuckles whiten around an empty beaker. Hunger is still a rumor in the belly, but it has already taken residence behind the eyes. Nightfall finds you crouched by a sullen fire. Green alder hisses and spits. Blue peat smoke coils with steam until the air feels chewable. The room carries the sour ghost of sprouted grain and the lanolin reek of sodden homespun. Outside, the downpour eases to a meditative drip, plink, plink, against the thatch. A small, methodical ache awakens beneath your ribs. Not yet famine, but its harbinger, patient as a tax collector. You draw one deliberate breath, tasting peat and apprehension, and understand. The edifice has not fallen, but the joists are groaning. The first tremors are subtle, a low-frequency hum beneath the sternum. You rise into a dawn that feels rehearsed. The rain has withdrawn, but the hush it leaves behind is too complete, as though the village itself is holding its breath.
A pearl-gray fog crouches ankle-deep, threading between wattle walls and pooling in doorways like spilled milk. Sound travels wrapped in cotton. Your souls land with the hush of confession. Even the rooster's crow is muffled, apologetic. Heading toward the crossroads, you register a new pressure in the air, a taut wire strung between cottages. Greetings still pass, but they arrive late and leave early. Eyes flick sideways, measuring. Sentences fracture when a third shadow joins the conversation.
The social fabric, once a coarse but serviceable homespun, is beginning to ravel at the seams. Beneath the sagging eave, two men trade clipped syllables. You catch only shards. Your loft was heavier last week. Sworn I saw the sack move. The words are soft, yet edged like flint. Your footfall announces you. Silence drops like a portcullis. Twin smiles, thin, porcelain, flash and vanish. A standard entry from the Annales Gandens drifts up. By midsummer 1315, village courts in Artois and Hainaut logged a tripling of petty thefts, mostly grain, mostly between neighbors who had shared plows the previous spring. Cooperation, the quiet engine of the open field system, was stalling on mistrust.
At the well, 3 women form a tight knot, buckets dangling like plumb bobs into the dark. Mist beads on their kerchiefs. Exhaustion has etched new lines around their mouths. One coils the hemp rope, creak, splash, creak, while another hisses. She claims mice got her rye, but the loft smells of fresh meal. The third studies the water's trembling mirror and murmurs, "Desperate folk forget who watched their babes last harvest." A quick shoulder check when your shadow crosses theirs. The smile offered is a reflex, not an invitation. A period detail surfaces from a 1316 inquest in Norfolk. Households began stitching tiny badges, crosses, moons, colored thread onto sack mouths so that a midnight borrower could not palm the wrong bundle. Here, the same instinct. A trio of burlap sacks leans against a wall, each throat cinched with a scrap of scarlet or indigo cloth, bright as warning flags. Children, too, have learned the new grammar. They orbit their mother's skirts, gazes solemn as clerics. On the green, 4 boys lob a willow wand in desultory arcs. An adult's approach freezes the game mid-toss, every small face tilting upward in wary appraisal.
You pause at a sunken herb plot where sage and thyme should shoulder through the loam. Instead, the rows sag, half drowned. The gardener, an elder whose spine still remembers military drill, stands motionless, brows knotted. 3 doors down asked for my dried beans, he says without looking up. Told them the jar's near empty. Truth is, it is. Wish it weren't. The confession hangs between you, heavy as the fog. Generosity is not dead, only gagged by the arithmetic of survival. Modern scholarship still spars. Were the recorded assaults and midnight raids spontaneous eruptions of hunger, or did scarcity simply ignite smoldering grudges over strip boundaries and unpaid labor days? Here, the question is not academic. It is the widening crack between yesterday's handshake and tomorrow's clenched fist. You spot the evidence in small, sharpened gestures. A widow who once borrowed a spindle now turns her back when the lender passes. The orchardist, his trees heavy with unripe pippin, has driven an iron hasp through the wicket and keeps the key on a thong beneath his shirt, even while he weeds the rows at noon. Possession has become a reflex, like flinching from a raised hand.
Midday finds the priest threading the lanes, cassock plastered to his shins like wet parchment. He lifts 2 fingers in benediction, recites per pater under his breath, but the gesture looks rehearsed, the words thinned by repetition. Between doorways he kneads the bridge of his nose, eyes narrowed against a headache no psalm can cure. Faith is a lantern. Hunger is a wind that gutters the flame. At the Commons, 7 adults ring a scarred trestle. The debate is a braid of whispers, equal shares by head count, counters by mouths to feed, undercut by share nothing and wake to an empty loft.
A matron proposes petitioning the manor. A snort ripples round the table. The lord's granary is bolted. His reeve counts every modius twice. No one raises a voice above the drip of eaves. Sedition is a luxury, best spoken softly. By afternoon, the fog thins to a gauze, revealing the baker's threshold. A knot of neighbors presses close, shoulders brushing. 12 loaves from a half sack, one mutters. The baker's wife lifts flour-dusted palms. Swear by the Virgin, the dough scarce filled the trough. Skepticism hums like a hive. The air is too sodden for fire, yet resentment smolders all the same.
Dusk folds early. You hunker inside a turf-walled hut while the rain resumes its patient morse on the shingles. Beyond the door, a muffled dispute ends with the thud of oak on oak jam, followed by a curse swallowed by the dark. The village has shrunk to the radius of each hearth's glow. By the fire, you nurse a cup of hot water laced with charred crust. The heat reaches your palms, but not your core. The deeper chill is social, once a neighbor, now a rival across a strip of drowned barley. Morning arrives sodden and metallic. The sky withholds its verdict, granting only a dripping truce. Mist prowls the lanes like a bailiff taking inventory. The road to the next manor, once a firm causeway of packed clay, has collapsed into a slithering trough. Halfway along, a two-wheeled tumbrel lies on its side, axle sheared clean. Rain has pried open the lid of a saltfish barrel. The contents have liquefied into a pewter sludge that smells of low tide and defeat. A single lost cargo could have staved off a family's hunger for a fortnight. Manorial bailiff's rolls from Essex to Flanders logged dozens of such wrecks in 1315 to 16, each severed link in the fragile chain of trade. Further on, a peddler coaxes a foundering mule. Both creatures wear a second skin of ochre mud to the hocks. The man's hood is thrown back. Rain beads in his beard like tiny pearls of mercury. The peddler spits a clot of mud from his lip, then forces his mouth into a merchant's grin when your gaze meets his. Cheeks sunken, eyes ringed and bruised purple, he looks more scarecrow than traitor. The canvas pack across his withers hangs slack, as though the goods inside have evaporated. "Bridge at the ford's gone again," he rasps, voice fraying like wet twine. "Took the high track, swallowed axle deep before the first milestone. Mule near drowned." He shrugs, but the motion is brittle, a man measuring how many more failures he can survive. A memory from the Chronicon Angliae surfaces. In the autumn of 1315, the Ouse rose 6 feet overnight and carried away the timber span at St. Ives. 3 weeks later, the replacement was swept clean. One lost crossing could starve a market town for a month. At the Grove, the mist parts around a crude barricade, gnarled ash limbs and field stones stacked chest high. 4 villagers stand sentinel, pitchforks and billhooks angled like pikes. A woman with cracked lips and a staff white-knuckled in her fist lifts a palm. "Name your errand, cart or pack?" Her tone is polite, but the questions come too fast, rehearsed. Behind her, a boy no older than 10 peers into every fold of your cloak. Trade, once the lifeblood that pulsed along these lanes, has curdled into suspicion. She explains in a weary rush, "We greeted peddlers with bread and ale last Michaelmas. Now we count their sacks twice and pray the river doesn't count them for us." The Annals Paulini record the same collapse. By winter 1315-16, toll-keepers on the Thames reported traffic down to 1 wagon, where 20 once passed daily. Half the horses foundered, the rest were eaten. Isolation was not a side effect, it was the famine's silent partner. The forest path,
once a green tunnel humming with finches, lies sodden and mute. Alder roots drink from standing pools. Brambles sag like broken umbrellas. Even the birds have learned economy. A lone robin offers 2 cautious notes, then thinks better of it. Shouts carry through the vapor. You crest a rise and find 6 men wrestling a high-sided wain from a mire that grips the wheels like a living thing. Ropes bite into shoulders. Boots piston in and out with wet sucking sounds. The load is swathed in patched sailcloth, lashed with hemp, the knots tarred and double-reeved. From the wagon's draft and the way the axles groan, you guess peas or vetches, enough to seed a hide or feed a hamlet for a week. Each heave spatters the men with liquid clay. Curses come in short, precise bursts, the vocabulary of exhaustion. Cooperation frays even here. One shoves when another pulls. A third snaps that the rope man is slacking. The same chroniclers who tallied grain prices noted a spike in fraternal affrays over shared oxen and borrowed carts. Neighbor set against neighbor by the arithmetic of survival. You step back, letting the mist close behind you. The wagon lurches free with a sound like a bone resetting, and the men sag against the spokes, breathing hard. No one cheers.
A footnote, rarely printed in school primers, drifts up. Carters in the Ardennes and the Weald scattered armfuls of rye straw or fir needles ahead of the wheels, hoping the brittle lattice would bite into the slime. You spot the proof. Pale, trampled ribbons of straw mashed into the ruts, already dissolving back into the mire. A brief purchase, then surrender. From the ridge, the valley unrolls like a torn tapestry. Hamlets perch on hillsides that bleed earth in slow ochre rivers. The river itself has forgotten its channel and sprawls across the Domaine in silver sheets. Wheat stubble pokes through the flood like the ribs of a drowned giant. Your lungs stutter at the sheer acreage of ruin. A dossier of clerical letters, archbishops to the curia, abbots to their daughters, confirms the same vista from the Scheldt to the Severn, one continuous mirror of sky where grain once waved. The peddler materializes beside you, pack collapsed to a wrinkled afterthought. "Set out for Bruges a fortnight gone," he says, voice scraped thin. "Thought the sea might still cough up herring or Baltic rye. Roads turned to soup. Harbor looked like a ship's graveyard. Keels up, masts snapped like kindling." He fingers a walnut-sized boat whittled from alder, lashed to his belt with twine. Some carry wheels, some oars, anything that once moved. The charm clicks softly against his hip as he shifts weight, a metronome of superstition.
His parting shot lingers. Mud won't kill you. Not knowing which ford is passable, which gate opens, that will. Economic historians nod in footnotes. When the arterial roads clogged, a surplus in Ghent became a deficit in Lille within days. The famine metastasized along the very routes meant to feed it. Twilight lowers a slate lid. The lane gleams like hammered pewter. Each puddle holds a dying ember of sky. Rain returns in courteous taps, then a steady drum. By the time you cross the threshold, your mantle drips a small, deliberate pool on the packed earth. You crouch by a fire that has forgotten how to roar, breathing in the sour steam of wet homespun. Distance and closeness collapse. The continent is vast and unreachable. The next cottage, a foreign shore. Dawn is a rumor behind cloud. The village exhales restraint. Doors open later, voices drop to conspiratorial thirds. You climb the switchback to the manor, boots skating on slick cobbles. Inside the hall, smoke hangs low. A maid edges in with a pewter salver no larger than a prayer book. At its center, a thumb-sized wedge of cheese, pale and grainy,
shaped by pressing curds in a cupped palm. She sets it before the lady of the house as though laying down a relic. The noblewoman's fingers hover, then withdraw. Her smile is courteous, her eyes ancient with apology.
The manor clings to its stateliness, but the effort shows in every strange gesture. The oaken gate hangs askew, its iron hinges weeping rust into the grain. 2 sentries slump against the arch, their mail cloaks dulled to the color of wet slate, stippled with corrosion where the rain has gnawed through wax and oil. One tugs at a gauntlet, muttering about chafed knuckles gone red and weeping. "Leather won't dry proper," he grumbles, voice low as if the fog might report him. Their nods to you are perfunctory, eyes sunken from nights spent shivering on watch. In the courtyard, a trio of scullions shuffles past, clutching bundles of wilted chervil, sinewy strips of salt pork, and sacks that sag like half-drawn purses. The kitchen door gapes. A gust carries the thin vegetable scent of potage boiled from parsnip tops. Manorial accounts from Picardy to the Palatinate tell the same story. By late 1315, even baronial cellars bled reserves at triple the usual rate, with reeves rationing flour by the half-peck. The servants' faces mirror the ledgers, pinched, vigilant, each pair of hands cradling a turnip or a knucklebone as if it were a reliquary.
The great hall's door groans on its pintles, exhaling air sharp with damp stone and spent tallow. Inside, shadows pool under a ceiling ribbed like an upturned ship. Torches hiss, their flames bullied by drafts. The long table, once groaning under capons and marchpane, now bears only clay bowls of barley skilly, gruel so thin it reflects the rafters, and a scatter of greens gone limp as wet linen. The hearth fire wheezes, fed by logs that steam before they burn, stacked in a moss-slick pile. At the table's head, the Lord presides, but his presence is no pageant. His jawline, once squared by authority, has softened into hollows. His gaze darts, alert to every clink of spoon. A sheaf of episcopal missives from the period whispers a quiet custom. Lords and abbots shaved their own portions, half a trencher, a skipped supper, to keep the illusion of plenty for retainers and almsmen. You see it in the way he nudges a bowl toward his steward, his own untouched. Across the hall, the steward hunches over a trestle littered with parchments, columns of tallies for rye, cod, lentils. His quill ticks like a death-watch beetle. 6 quarters, 3 bushels, 1 peck. He recalculates, lips moving silently, then again, louder, as if the numbers might yield to insistence. The verdict needs no voice. The stores will not see Candlemas.
A chambermaid glides in, balancing a salver with a cheese no larger than a child's fist, its rind patched together from scraps. She hesitates, shoulders rising as if to apologize, then sets it before the lady by the hearth. The noblewoman's nod is kind, but her eyes, red-rimmed, fixed on the middle distance, carry the weight of a house that can no longer afford its own name. The storage vaults beckon down a dripping passage where the walls sweat like fevered skin. A faint gurgle rises from the foundations, as though the earth itself is gargling floodwater. In the first cellar, ale casks stand in rows, but a rap on their staves returns a hollow knock. Most hold barely a gallon, watered to stretch the malt. A peculiar habit noted in a 1316 steward's report from Hainaut comes to mind. Some brewers tossed in pounded oak gulls to mimic the bite of proper ale, fooling the tongue, if not the belly. The dregs here taste of surrender, flat and faintly sour. The grain room is worse. Sacks of oats and spelt line the walls, but the stacks are shallow, barely reaching the height of a man's knee. A porter lingers by the door, breath hitching as your shadow crosses his. His fingers flex, ready to bar the way. In his mind, even a glance could pilfer a handful of meal. Upstairs, a knight in a patched gambeson grouses that his destrier's ribs now show sharper than his own, the hayloft down to chaff and dust. A dame in a gown gone limp with damp frets about All Souls' Day, when frost will come to finish what rain began.
Two scullery maids huddle beneath the stairwell, voices barely louder than the drip of eaves. At Sir Hugh's domain, they've felled the ox team, one breathes. Plough beasts, not yet lame, slit the throats at dawn. The other crosses herself, eyes wide, as though the stone might overhear and judge. A marginal note in the Liber Albus of a Yorkshire abbey confirms the breach. By Lent 1316, manorial stewards recorded the culling of breeding stock, mares, ewes, even the lord's palfrey, when hay ran to thistle and chaff. The pleasure garden lies gutted. Raised beds have slumped into troughs of coffee-colored water. Rosemary and thyme float like seaweed. A lone gardener kneels ankle-deep in slurry, coaxing a clutch of leeks, whose stalks are yellowed and brittle. His fingers, blue with cold, tremble as he pinches off rot. Domine, da nobis solem, he whispers, the plea half Latin, half sob. Historians still spar over the gradient of misery. Did stone walls merely delay the inevitable, or did they buy months of life? Here the answer is carved in the Lord's gaunt wrists and the gardener's cracked knuckles. Privilege buys posture, not plenty. Back in the hall, the torches gutter in a draught that snakes through arrow slits. The Lord paces the length of the bare refectory boards, each footfall a dull knell. At the lancet window, he stops, palms braced on the sill, staring down at the drowned domain. The fields shimmer like polished steel. Nothing moves but the water. Wealth, he seems to realize, is only a longer fuse.
Twilight drains the color from the courtyard. Servants ferry the day's leavings, 3 bowls of skilly, a rind of cheese, back to the scullery. Footsteps hushed, as if louder noise might shatter the fragile truce with hunger. The manor gates sigh shut behind you, a long bronchial groan of oak and iron. Rain begins again, deliberate as a bailiff's knock. Dawn arrives with a bovine low that frays into silence. The buyers gape like empty mouths. In the first stall, a farmer cradles the neck of a cow whose hide drapes over ribs like wet parchment. Its eyes are filmed, breath a shallow rattle. Veterinary treatises from the period list the cascade: moldy fodder, hoof rot, murrain. The man's prayer is a cracked whisper, repeated until the words lose shape. Further along, an enclosure stands vacant, save for hoofprints already filling with water. A knot of villagers forms a loose semicircle, voices pitched low. Took the sow at first light, one says. Couldn't nurse the litter, better one meal than 7 carcasses. Another stares at the churned earth as though reading omens in the mud. The absence is louder than any bleat or low. You learn that 2 ewes vanished in the dark. No bleat, no broken fence, just an empty pen and a single tuft of wool snagged on a thorn. The villagers form a silent ring, shoulders brushing, eyes scanning the tree line as though the night itself might confess.
A marginal gloss in a Flemish bailiff's roll flickers across memory. Families in the Skeld Valley dragged their last goats into beech copses at dusk, tethering them to roots and praying the scent of wet leaves would mask the musk of fear. Here, the proof lies in a lattice of hazel wands half hidden behind brambles, its gate lolling open on a frayed cord. Fresh boot prints, broad, deep, lead away into the fog. A widow you pass later answers your question with a sound like dry leaves. 3 hens left, she says, gesturing at a coop now spacious as a cathedral. The rest starved or went to peddlers who swore they'd fetch silver in Rouen. Her apron is a map of earth that no scrubbing erases. The village reshapes itself around absence. No cluck of alarm when a door opens, no impatient stamp of hoof on cobbles, no rooster hurling defiance at the gray. Silence pools where sound once lived. Dawn finds a carter crouched beside his gelding. The horse's ribs arched like barrel staves. Its near foreleg ends in a hoof the man cradles as though it were porcelain. A tear tracks the grime on his cheek before he sleeves it away. The state surveys from Norfolk to Normandy list the same grim arithmetic. A plow horse needs a stone of oats daily. When the bin holds only dust, the beast becomes a walking mortgage. One corpse in the furrow means one strip fallow, one family's seed unsown.
Midday, the herdsman leans on his staff where knee-high grass should wave. 2 cows and a calf, the color of weak tea, stand in a triangle of exhaustion. Last spring, I fretted that the pasture would not hold them, he says, voice flat as the flooded mere behind him. Now I count ribs. He nods toward the horizon. Folk speak of oxen found wandering the causeways, yokes still on, too spent to pull, cut loose by owners who could not feed them another mile. The image lingers, great beasts adrift in a world too waterlogged for roads, too empty for mercy. Suspicion seasons every glance. Strangers from over the hill, one mutters, or the baker who smiled yesterday. Court rolls from 13, 16, 17 bulge with indictments for nocturnal larceny, yet the margins note as many beasts lost to murrain or simple abandonment. The question is not who took the sheep, but whether the answer matters when hunger sits at every hearth. The herdsman's headshake lingers like a tremor in the ground. Barns along the lane have drawn in on themselves, doors barred before full light, shutters latched with fresh twine, as though the wood itself fears what night might steal next. A cow, a pig, a clutch of hens, each was a living ledger of milk, labor, manure, and meat. Their absence is a subtraction felt in the bones of the village. Night folds you into a cottage where the fire is more glow than heat. Beyond the door, a single bovine moan drifts across the waterlogged fields, thin, wavering, the last note of a song everyone knows by heart. You let the silence settle, tracing the hollow where sound used to live.
Dawn arrives with a bite of smoke that should speak of porridge, but instead carries a metallic edge. Hunger has turned alchemist. Outside, a cauldron squats on stones. The woman tending it prods a broth the color of dishwater. Nettles, dock, and a fistful of chaff swirl beneath her spoon. A few doors down, a baker lifts a loaf the shade of wet ash, acorn meal, bran, and a prayer for cohesion. It sags in his mittened hands like a sodden psalter. A child, on a threshold, gnaws a strip of inner bark, cheeks working with the solemn rhythm of a communicant. Her mother's smile is a brave stitch across worry. In the pigsty, 2 sows nose the mire for peelings no larger than fingernails. The woman who throws them watches with the stillness of someone measuring how many more mornings remain. Behind a wattle screen, a cooper kneels over a bubbling pot. Strips of harness leather, once proud with brass, curl and soften in the steam. "Saddle from my father's palfrey," he says, meeting your eyes without flinching. The smell is rank, but shame has been boiled out of him. Near the green, a cluster of neighbors toast pellets of oat dust and hulls over a sulky fire. The lumps disintegrate at a breath. A mother coos that they are honey cakes for brave hearts. Her children chew slowly, eyes fixed on her face for confirmation.
At the lane's end, an old man hunches over a quern, grinding pale fern rhizomes into last year's rye tailings. Sweat beads despite the chill.
Heard tell the Irish lived on this in lean times, he mutters, though the doubt in his voice could sour milk. Paleoclimatic reconstructions and archaeobotany now map the same shift. Pollen cores from Flanders to the fens show a spike in bracken and goosefoot where wheat once ruled. The chronicles were too proud to list every weed that kept a pulse beating. Hunger has become a tinkerer, patching bodies with whatever the hedgerow yields. The village smells of sour mash, boiled hide, and the faint, stubborn sweetness of hope refusing to curdle. The debate lives in every cautious bite. A matron winnows goosefoot seeds, wondering aloud whether the leaves will scour the gut or merely cramp it. Her neighbor swears by twice-boiled dock, yet her own cheeks are sunken from nights spent hunched over the privy. Modern toxicology nods. Oxalic acid in sorrel, alkaloids in nightshade relatives, plants that can sustain for a week and fell a child in a day. Here, the margin between forage and poison is measured in trembling hands. A lad no higher than your waist tugs your sleeve, palms cupped around a clutch of fungi. Inky caps, lawyer's wig, one deadly gallerina gleaming like wet ivory. "Ma says stew," he beams. You crouch, heart ticking, and point to the green-stained gills. "Death cap," you whisper. He shrugs. Hunger has already taught him that risk is just another flavor. He scampers off. You watch the small back disappear into a cottage where the chimney exhales a sour, fungal steam.
Wind prowls the lanes, rattling shutters like loose teeth. Pens are patched with barrel staves, a torn shift, a broken plowshare, anything that will hold a goat through the night. Knots are tied with muttered aves and older charms, the kind grandmothers once used against the evil eye. A woman laughs, brittle. "We forgot the world had so many tastes until it served them all at once." At the green, baskets overflow with last year's apples. Most collapsed into brown froth, a few wizened cores clinging to life. Knives pare away rot with surgical care. The air is thick with cider vinegar and resignation. "Connoisseurs of decay," someone quips. The jest dies quickly, but the smile lingers like a brave flag. A cooper stirs a pot of bean pod grit and sour ale, face twisted against the taste. "Like licking a tannery," he says, ladling it anyway. Nearby, a couple splits dried peas from their husks, peas for supper, pods for tomorrow's stock. Their silence is companionable, the quiet arithmetic of survival. Voices rise at a doorway. "Charlock's safe if you leech it thrice," counters, "My cousin voided blood for a week." An elder parts them with a raised palm. "Boil till the water's clear, then boil again. Fear seasons worse than any weed." The quarrel subsides into the hiss of a fresh pot. By the marketplace, a peddler, once a baker, offers paper twists of rye dust and elm cambium. Fills the belly, not the soul, she admits. Copper changes hands all the same. Night lowers a lid. Smoke from 100 improvised stews coils upward, thin and acrid. You cradle a bowl of hot water, thickened with fern meal and a shred of something unidentifiable. It scalds your tongue, then warms the hollow beneath your ribs. Around you, families lean into the glow, chasing the illusion that heat equals sustenance. The fire pops, sparks rise like small, defiant prayers. Hunger has redrawn the map of edible, bark, pod, fungus, leather, whatever the earth grudgingly yields. You sip the last of the broth, tasting grit and stubborn hope, and understand that this is merely the prologue to a longer, leaner chapter. Mist clings like a second skin as you leave the last cottage behind. The path into the trees is no longer a trail, but a suggestion, boots sinking ankle deep in loam that smells of iron and rot. The forest, once a larder of firewood and hazel wands, has become a gauntlet. A knot of foragers overtakes you, baskets slung low, eyes scanning the duff like scribes over a palimpsest. One man lifts a branch. The underside is scraped clean of lichen, pale scars where someone earlier pried away lobaria for a peppery broth. A girl no taller than a shepherd's crook kneels by an oak, fingernails black with earth, coaxing a single acorn from a shell already split by a squirrel's teeth. She pockets the kernel as though it were a relic.
Near a fallen beech, an elder works with a bone knife, shaving the cambium into curls the color of candle wax. Ash, elm, birch, any will do if you roast the bitterness out, he mutters, eyes flicking to the canopy as if the tree might demand rent. A 1316 forester's inquest from the Ardennes notes the same. Bark harvests so heavy that saplings were ringed and killed, leaving naked white ghosts for the next season's charcoal burners. Deeper, the light thins to pewter. Puddles reflect nothing but branches. A woman taps her basket. 3 wrinkled sloes, a fist of hazelnuts, a clutch of wood sorrel, whose oxalic bite will scour the gut by nightfall. Better a cramp than an empty belly, she says, but her fingers linger on a death cap's creamy cap before she flicks it away. A snare lies sprung and empty, the noose chewed to frayed hemp. 2 men crouch, reading the scuffle in the mud. Claw marks, a smear of blood, then the heavier print of a human heel. Fox didn't drag it off, one growls. The other spits. Nor wolf. Hunger has taught every creature to thieve. The air stills. A wolf's howl rolls through the trunks, closer than yesterday. Villagers mark the sound the way sailors mark a reef. Broken twigs form crude arrows, pointing toward berry patches already stripped to the stem. A scrap of red wool flutters from a thorn like a warning pennant. Between the trees, older stories stir. A boy swears he saw a pale shape glide at dawn. No face, only height. An old woman insists the will-o'-the-wisp that once lured drunks into bogs now guides the starving to secret mushroom rings. Tired eyes breed phantoms. Hunger gilds them with purpose. You step over a circle of stones blackened by recent fire. Someone boiled leather here, or worse. The forest no longer feeds the village. It trades with it, exacting its own toll in cramps, visions, and the slow erosion of certainty. The square, once a heartbeat of barter and gossip, now exhales restraint. Stalls lean like weary sentinels, canvas patched with sacking and prayer. A fishmonger lifts a single salted herring as though it were a relic. The price, he whispers, is 3 times last Michaelmas. Nearby, a woman offers a twist of nettle yarn, dyed the color of pond scum. Buyers circle slowly, hands buried in sleeves, afraid a quick reach might spark accusation. A baker, his apron once white, sets out 4 loaves, no larger than fists. The crusts are pale, the crumb dense with sawdust and bean meal. Fills the gut, keeps the peace, he mutters when a customer hesitates.
Across the way, a boy balances a basket of shriveled windfalls. Each apple bears a careful slice to prove the core is not entirely rot. A queue forms, patient as penitents. Voices stay low, but the tension hums. A farmer accuses a merchant of short measure. The merchant's reply is a shrug and a palm turned upward, empty. No one raises a fist. Energy is too precious. Instead, eyes narrow, memories sharpen. A reeve in a patched tabard moves among them, tallying in a wax tablet, his quill scratching like a beetle. He will report to the manor tonight. How many pecks changed hands,
How many promises were made against next year's harvest that may never come? At the fountain, its basin cracked, water stagnant, a cluster of women trade rumors. One claims a peddler from St. Omer sold rye at half the price. Another snorts that the grain was weevilled and the peddler long gone. A third clutches a twist of salt as though it were gold, bartered for her wedding ring. Salt is now the difference between broth and water. Children dart between legs, offering handfuls of dandelion greens or a single mushroom cap. Their mothers hush them, afraid a bold sale might draw the reeve's eye. A priest lingers at the edge, blessing a sack of peas with a murmured benedice. No one asks for alms. Pride and hunger have struck an uneasy truce.
By noon, the square is nearly empty. Stalls fold like tired birds. What little was offered is gone, swapped for a knife, a promise, a scrap of hope. The cobbles glisten with drizzle, footprints fill and vanish. You stand in the sudden quiet, the weight of unsold hunger settling around you like the mist. Tomorrow the merchants will return, pockets lighter, prices higher, voices softer still. The market has become a ledger of what the village can no longer afford to lose. The merchant's table is a still life of defeat. 3 fistfuls of barley, a twist of wilted sage, 2 carrots the color of old parchment. He lifts one root between thumb and forefinger as though it might bite. 3 pennies, he says, voice cracked from disuse. Last harvest it was 1. The bruise beneath his eyes is the ledger of every sleepless night since. Town rolls from Ghent to York confirm the spiral, wheat leaping from 6D to 20D a quarter in a single moon, wages frozen like the flooded fields. A woman across the aisle cradles a sack of oat chaff as if it were silk. Boil it slow, skim the scum, it swells, she murmurs to a customer whose purse strings tremble. The sale is sealed with a nod. Hunger has streamlined haggling to a single heartbeat. Eyes linger too long on neighbors' baskets. A child's hand hovers above a heap of bean meal loaves, dense, dark, smelling of earth and desperation. The baker tears a corner. You taste grit and the faint bitterness of locust pods. Husks from the bin floor, he admits. A matron chews with closed eyes as though memory might sweeten it. Another swallows hard, cheeks flaming, unable to spit out what cost a morning's labor. At the fishmonger's stall, salt cod lies in brittle rafters. The air is sharp with the tang of early rot. One bundle, when unwrapped, exhales a sour cloud. Still, hands reach. A youth's voice cracks. 2 shillings for rancid stock? The merchant's smile is a rictus. His fingers drum the coins already counted. The crowd presses, breath fogging the damp. A single push could ignite the square, but the moment passes like a held breath released. The boy stalks off, the merchant's shoulders sagged with the weight of tomorrow's prices. In the shadow of the fountain, traders haggle in whispers. Half-rotten apples, jars of honey no more than a finger deep. Watered? A woman challenges. The seller's denial is quick, but his eyes slide away. On the scale, a river pebble, smooth, incised with a crude cross, balances against a palm of grain. Homemade weights, born of distrust, keep the peace where trust has fled. Every transaction is a small duel. Hope parrying necessity, honesty dueling survival. The square empties slowly, stalls folding like tired wings. What was bought will not fill a belly for long, but it buys another dawn. You leave with the taste of sour bread on your tongue and the echo of trembling hands in your ears. The stones on the scale are river smooth, each scratched with a notch or a cross. When the table tilts, the barley shifts. The farmer's breath catches. Short again, he mutters. The merchant steadies the pan with a trembling thumb, swearing by the Virgin the weight is true.
A neighbor steps in, lays a third pebble beside the others, his own, carried in a pouch for just such moments. The balance evens. The sail proceeds in silence, but the air stays brittle. At the green, clusters tighten like knots in wet rope. A woman lifts her shawl, undyed wool, once her wedding gift, and lets it fall across a merchant's palm for 3 cupped handfuls of barley. The grains rattle like hail into her apron. Nearby, a joiner sets down his adze and plane. The steel is bright, the handles worn smooth by his father's grip. In exchange, he takes a sack of peas no larger than a child's head. Hands shake too much to carve now, he says. The buyer tests the edge of the adze, nods, and the tools vanish beneath a cloak, someone else's future. The fishmonger from the coast is back, voice oiled with practice. He unwraps a bundle. The cod inside is soft, dark at the edges. Last catch before the gales, he insists. A woman leans in, sniffs, recoils. The price is still spoken. A coin changes hands. Court rolls from Bruges to Winchester record the same dance. Accusations of false weight, of spoiled stock, of fists raised and then lowered, because strength is rationed like bread.
Rain arrives in needles, stitching the square in gray. Canvas flaps are tugged down, hoods rise. No one leaves. A boy's gaze fixes on a heap of chestnuts, shriveled, matte, the color of old blood. His mother's fingers close around his wrist. He lowers his eyes without protest. Around them, children stand like small shadows, learning the arithmetic of want. An elder at the edge sells twists of nettle and thistle flower. Boil it thick, it binds the gut, he says, stroking his beard as though coaxing memory. We walked past these weeds when the barns were full. His smile is thin but genuine. Someone presses a copper into his palm for a packet no larger than a prayer book. Stalls fold, baskets close. The rain keeps its patient rhythm, erasing footprints almost as quickly as they form. You leave the square with the taste of damp wool in your mouth, and the image of a joiner's adze disappearing into a stranger's keeping. The market has become a ledger of what can still be surrendered. The bakery door is a narrow throat of stone. The crowd presses like a single hungry organism. Inside, the apprentice, barely 16, flour ghosting his lashes, lifts a tray of 6 pallid rolls, each no larger than a child's fist. The scent is not yeast, but sour damp, the ghost of bread. A woman's voice slices the air. You've more hidden. Saw the sack myself. Another swears a neighbor left at dawn with loaves under her cloak. The boy's mouth opens, closes. His knuckles whiten around the tray. Only what the mill gave, he manages, but the words drown in the rising tide of accusation.
An elder shoulders forward. Open the Lord's granary then, enough for all. A hiss answers. Treason talk. The elder laughs, a sound like breaking ice. Treason's a full belly now. Hands dart. 2 men seize the same roll. It splits, crumbs pattering like hail. A girl drops to scrape them into her cupped palms, tears cutting clean tracks through the grime on her cheeks. Her mother hauls her upright, whispering apology to the stones. Outside, the square fractures into smaller quarrels. 2 women circle a missing hen. One claims it strayed, the other that it was lifted at moonrise. Their voices climb until a knot of onlookers forms, drawn less by justice than by the spectacle of something happening. Near the pens, youths trade ghost stories. A shadow at the barn latch, footsteps that matched no villager's tread. The enclosures stand empty, gates ajar like broken jaws. A peddler lashes his last bundle, cracked bowl, fist of wool, wilted sage,
to a sagging mule. "Grabbed my pack yesterday," he mutters, eyes flicking to every passerby. "Held on by the grace of these two hands." He is gone before the dust settles. At the well, buckets clash. A youth stands accused of midnight draws, hoarding while others wait for dawn. "Rain fills it for all," he protests, but the circle tightens. A woman's voice cracks like a whip. "My child's lips are split. Where's your share?" Hands rise, not yet fists, but the air tastes of sparks.
The chapel crouches at the village edge, its roof weeping moss. Inside, candle stubs gutter in puddles of tallow. The priest's voice is a threadbare litany. No one kneels long. Knees ache, bellies louder than prayer. Hunger has outgrown the church. It spills into lanes, into accusations, into the very mortar between stones. The priest's arms tremble as he lifts them, cassock sleeves sodden to the elbow. "Pax vobiscum," he pleads, but the Latin frays against the anger in the square. The crowd ebbs like a sullen tide, boots dragging through puddles, eyes still hot. A woman clutches a cracked wooden bowl to her chest as though it were a shield. No one apologizes, no one forgives. The air stays primed, a tinderbox waiting for the next careless word. Near the hedge, a man sits hunched over a fist-sized loaf, crust split, interior pale as tallow. He turns it in his hands the way a miser counts coins. "Found it by Widow Agnes's door," he whispers when you pause. "Dropped or left?" His gaze flickers to the chapel, to the sky, to the mud at his feet. Hunger has redrawn the map of sin. The boundary between gift and theft is now measured in the width of a heartbeat.
Dusk gathers early. In the lane, two neighbors lock arms over a torn grain sack. "You slit the seam," one bellows. "I felt the weight this morning." The other's denial is a snarl. Fists rise, then villagers haul them apart, less from charity than fear of wasting strength. Bruises bloom. The sack lies forgotten, its contents already half spoiled by rain. The merchant is gone, mule's hooves printing frantic commas in the mud. His chipped bowl and wilted herbs are all that remain of his stall, abandoned like shed skin. Inside the chapel, candle stubs hiss in their own wax. The altar holds a meager tithe: 3 copper obols, a twist of nettle, a bowl of gruel filmed with cold, a heel of bread hard as shale. The priest's voice is a thread: "Panem nostrum quotidianum da nobis odie." His fingers hover over the offerings, blessing what is no longer daily, but desperate. A child at the back clutches her mother's skirt, eyes fixed on the bread, as though it might multiply. Outside, shutters clatter shut. Hearth glow leaks through cracks like guilty secrets. The village folds inward, guarding its last scraps of warmth, its last illusions of safety. You sit by a fire that offers more smoke than heat, the day's shout still echoing in the rafters. Hunger has stepped out of bellies and into the streets. It walks openly now, shaping fists and prayers alike.
The chapel's hush is not peace, but a held breath. Rush mats exhale damp beneath kneeling weight. Candle flames bow and straighten in the draught. A woman's lips move over a wooden crucifix, each kiss a plea. Tears slip down another's face, caught quickly on a sleeve before they betray her. The priest's voice rises and falls. Perseverantia, caritas. Yet it cracks on the high notes, as though the Latin itself is starving. After the Amen, the nave does not empty. A farmer kneels, confessing yesterday's curse hurled over a spilled pail. I'm not myself.
he whispers. The priest's fingers worry the rosary beads, clicking softly. Hardship shows the cracks, he answers, but also where light can enter. A young mother edges forward, child asleep against her hip. Any barley for the box? She asks, voice barely louder than the candles. The priest's sorrow is a shadow across his face. He lifts the altar's bowl of cold gruel and tips half into her cupped hands. She bows as though receiving communion. Behind the altar, the granary door yawns on rusty hinges. 3 sacks slump against the wall, ropes knotted tight as fists. The grain's scent is a rumor beneath mildew and stone. Monastic account rolls from St. Albans to Fleury record the same collapse. Alms that once fed 50 now stretch to 5, then none.
Near the south transept, women sort a cedar chest of cast-off garments. A shawl, twice darned, passes from hand to hand like a relic. A boy receives mittens too large, thumbs poking through holes worn by another child's winters. When the priest announces, "No communal pottage this week," the room stills. A woman's breath hitches. A man's jaw sets like cooling iron. The words settle, heavier than any bell. Outside, wind rattles the door again, snuffing one candle. Wax hisses. In the half-light, faith and famine share the same thin air. The river has forgotten its name. Where it once threaded silver between willows, it now roars, the color of churned clay, gnawing at the banks like a starving dog. A half-submerged alder spins past, roots clawing the air. Villagers line the lip of the flood, silent, watching their lower meadows dissolve. One man drives a forked stake to mark the water's new edge. By the time he hammers the second, the first is already underwater. A gust slams the chapel bell against its frame, once, twice. Then the rope snaps, and the bronze tongue falls still. Rain needles sideways, stinging cheeks already raw. In the field, a woman wrestles a sagging hurdle of woven hazel. The wind rips it from her grip and flings it into the torrent. She does not chase it. Her hands stay open, palms up, as though the sky might return what it took.
Thunder rolls overhead, low and deliberate. The crows wheel back, black scraps against the bruise-colored clouds, their cries shredded by the wind. A child's voice rises behind you, thin but steady. Ave Maria Grazia Plena. The prayer is whipped away before the Dominus Tecum. You turn from the river. The path is a stream now, ankle deep, tugging at your boots. A fence post topples with a wet sigh, dragging its rails into the mud like a drowning man. Somewhere, a shutter bangs loose and flaps like a broken wing. The village huddles lower, roofs glistening, smoke from dying fires flattened by the gale. The storm is no longer weather. It is the famine's loud accomplice, erasing boundaries between field and flood, between what was planted and what will never grow. The bridge lists like a drunk, planks half under, half above the froth. 2 lads shout over the roar, one waving a hammer, insisting a few wedges will hold, the other jabbing a finger at the rising water line already lapping the handrail. Their words are snatched away before they reach the alders. Rain arrives in a slap, first scattered coins, then a solid sheet that drums the shed roof until the timbers sing. You huddle beneath the sagging eaves, boots in a growing puddle. Through the slats you watch lightning stitch the sky. Each flash freezes a tableau. A woman sprinting with a child bundled to her chest.
A man wrestling a barrel that rolls like a live thing. A dog cowering beneath an overturned cart. Thunder follows, close enough to rattle teeth. The storm spends itself in slow degrees. The downpour eases to a mutter, then a drip. You step out into a world rinsed raw. The path is a shallow stream. Every footprint fills before the next can form. A farmer stands in his gateway, staring at a field now one continuous mirror. Another tries to right a fence post. It slides from his grip like a greased eel. Sodden straw bundles, once golden ramparts against the flood, float in tatters, gray as old bandages. A child pokes one with a stick, watching it disintegrate. Near the well, the water is the color of weak ale, swirling with silt. Villagers lower buckets anyway, faces tight with the knowledge that tomorrow it may be worse. By twilight, the village is a study in exhaustion. Thatch sags in wet clumps. A cottage door hangs askew on a single hinge. A family spreads sodden logs beneath a torn awning, coaxing them apart with numb fingers. The air smells of drowned wood and resignation. No one speaks of the next storm. They simply listen for it in the hush between drips. The monk's sandals leave dark prints on the chapel floor, each step a small wet confession. 50 bowls last Lent, he says, voice low, as though the walls might overhear. Now 15, and half of those are water. His fingers, raw from cold, twist the frayed cuff of his habit. We still ring the bell at none, he adds, almost to himself, a reminder that time passes even when the granary does not.
Outside, the road has become a slow river of people. They move in a ragged line, cloaks plastered to their backs, boots dragging furrows in the mud. A woman with a child strapped to her chest pauses when you fall in beside her. Word is a cog from Danzig docked at Lynn with rye, she says, the name Rumor trembling on her tongue like a cracked tooth. Her husband carries their only pot. The child clutches a rag doll sodden to the color of ash. Further on, a man and his daughter pass in silence. The girl's spoon, handle polished by years of stirring pottage, catches the weak light. She holds it like a talisman. Her father's nod is a ledger of everything left behind. Plow, pig, the door that no longer needs latching. At the clearing, travelers huddle around a fire no larger than a dinner plate. A cooper's wife offers a slice of parched burdock root. It tastes of earth and smoke. Half our cattle died of rot, she says, and the seed corn sprouted in the sack. She tears the root in two, giving you the larger piece. The gesture is small, but it lands like a psalm. Bright scraps of cloth, once a sleeve, a kerchief, a child's apron, flutter from staffs and cart handles, brave flags in a losing war. A band of youth strides past, flasks sloshing, eyes fixed on a horizon that keeps receding. Any lord with a wall and a plow, one calls over his shoulder. Their laughter is thin, but it carries.
The road stretches, patient and merciless. Behind you, the village shrinks to a huddle of smoke and memory. Ahead, only the next rumor, the next muddy mile, the next fragile hope tied to a stick. The child's cough follows you like a thin thread pulled through the mist. It is the sound the village makes now when it dreams. You find the first cottage almost by instinct. The door stands ajar. Inside, a girl no older than 6 lies on a straw pallet, cheeks flushed, eyes too bright. Her mother spoons water thinned with willow bark into the small mouth. Fever since the storm, she whispers. No milk left to cool it. The father sits outside, carving a whistle from a reed he will never finish. The knife slips in fingers gone numb. Further along, an old woman rocks a swaddled infant, whose cry is more rasp than wail. The cradle is a flour barrel sawed in half. The blanket, a horse cloth too stiff to fold. She hums a tune older than the roof beams.
but the notes break on every third breath. At the green's edge, 3 children chase a hoop made from a broken barrel stave. Their laughter is sudden, startling, then gone as quickly as it came. One stumbles, coughs, and the game dissolves into silence. A boy no taller than your waist offers you a pebble warmed in his fist. "For luck," he says, solemn as a priest. You close your fingers around it. It is the only thing in the village that still holds heat. By a sagging gate, a grandmother teaches her grandson to chew a strip of inner birch bark. "Slow, slow," she murmurs. "Let it fool the belly." His jaws work with the patience of someone twice his age. When he swallows, he looks up and asks whether spring will taste different. She has no answer. The question hangs between them like the mist. Dusk returns the wanderers. They drift in from the crossroads, bundles lighter, rumors heavier. One carries a cracked wheel spoke as a walking staff. Another clutches a scrap of bright cloth torn from a stranger's banner. They do not speak of what they found, only of what they left. The village folds them back into its thinning arms, but the space they fill is smaller than before. You light your candle. Its flame is a small, stubborn star against the dark. Outside, the coughing threads on, soft, relentless, mapping the village in sound the way footprints once mapped the roads. The widow's needle flashes in the weak light, each stitch a small defiance against the cold. Her son, no more than 7 winters, leans close, fingers mimicking hers on a scrap of cloth. "Pull tight, but not too tight," she murmurs, "else the wool will pucker and tear again." The boy nods, tongue caught between teeth in concentration. The cloak is patched in a dozen places. Soon it will be more mend than original. When the last knot is tied, she drapes it over his shoulders. It swallows him, but his eyes shine with the pride of a knight newly armed. Nearby, the father lifts the empty cup from his daughter's hands and presses it to his own lips, as though a ghost of sweetness might linger. She watches, then rests her head against his arm. Her legs swing once, twice, then still. The bench creaks beneath their combined weight, a sound like an old man clearing his throat. At the firewood stack, the carved horse lies abandoned. The boy who held it now sleeps curled against his sister, both breathing shallow and quick. Their mother sits guard, eyes fixed on the lane, waiting for a husband who left at dawn with a snare and a prayer. The damp logs hiss when she shifts them, refusing to catch. The grandmother's voice drifts through the quilted roof, and the smallest child reached up, and the bread was warm as summer. The boy's eyelids flutter. One thumb finds a mouth grown too old for comfort. Outside, the mist thickens, swallowing the edges of the village until only the faint glow of hearths remains, small, stubborn stars in a sky that has forgotten how to shine. You carry the weight of their silences back to your cottage. The candle you lit earlier gutters in its pool of tallow, throwing shadows that dance like the children who no longer can. Hunger has not only emptied bellies, it has folded childhood into something smaller, quieter, a thing that fits inside a single berry-sweetened sip, or a story about rivers of milk. The steward unrolls the parchment further, as though its length might lend weight to the words. Ink has run in the damp. The Lord's seal is a bruised smear. 3 extra days per hide, he repeats, voice cracking like thin ice. For drainage ditches, the demesne floods worse than your strips. A woman steps forward, basket dangling empty at her side. My man's hands shake too hard to grip a spade, she says.
He gave blood to the plow last spring. What's left to give? Her neighbor, a cooper whose barrels now stand empty, adds that his ox dropped in the furrow yesterday. The carcass feeds the crows, not the manor. The steward's mouth opens, closes. The parchment trembles in his grip. Fists clench, but no one swings. Energy is rationed like grain. A boy, no older than 10, leans against his father's leg, eyes fixed on the rusted mattock as though it were a foreign relic. The tool's handle is wrapped in rags, where splinters have worked free. The iron head is freckled orange. Last Michaelmas, it turned the Lord's wheat. Now it leans like a question mark. The steward tries again. Refusal means forfeiture. The word lands heavy, but hollow. Forfeiture of what? A strip already drowned? A cow already dead? Someone laughs. Short, bitter. The sound of a man who has nothing left to lose but the mud on his boots. A girl tugs her mother's skirt. From a leather cord around her neck hangs a tiny pouch. She opens it with careful fingers. One smooth pebble, one downy feather. "For brave dreams," she whispers. The mother's eyes glisten, but she does not hush the child. Dreams are the only crop still growing. Rain begins again, soft as a confession. The crowd thins without decision, each family drifting back to its own small circle of want. The steward rolls the parchment tight, tucks it inside his cloak, and walks toward the manor alone. Behind him, the tools stay where they are, rust and silence, their only harvest. The herbalist's cottage sits at the village's frayed edge, its roof a patchwork of moss and hope. Inside, bundles of dried yarrow and nettle hang from the rafters like sleeping bats. The woman who tends them, Agnes, once the Reeves' wife, moves between jars with the slow certainty of someone rationing every motion. Her fingers, stained green at the tips, crush willow bark into a wooden bowl. "For the children's fevers," she says without looking up, "and the mother's aches." A single candle gutters beside her. Its light catches the hollows beneath her eyes. Outside, a midwife kneels by a doorstep, pressing a cool cloth to a boy's forehead. His cough rattles like dry peas in a pod. She hums under her breath, an old birthing song turned to lullaby, while her other hand measures drops of poppy syrup into a cracked cup. "Too much and he sleeps forever," she murmurs. "Too little and the pain keeps him awake." The mother watches, twisting her apron until the fabric threatens to tear. Further along, a wandering healer, robe patched, staff topped with a bundle of rags, barters knowledge for bread. He shows a circle of women how to steep pine needles for a tea that tricks the belly into stillness. Bitter is sin, he warns, but it buys an hour. In exchange, a girl offers a heel of rye bread gone soft with damp. He takes it reverently, as though it were manna. At the well, an old man boils water over a fire no larger than a dinner plate. Into it he drops handfuls of moss scraped from the chapel wall. "Draws the poison from wounds," he claims, though his eyes betray doubt. A woman with a festering cut on her hand watches, hope and skepticism warring on her face. She dips her fingers anyway. The water hisses. By the manor gate, the Lord's physician, once proud in velvet, now in threadbare wool, mixes charcoal and honey for a child whose bowels will not quiet. The honey is mostly water now, he confesses, but the charcoal binds what the body cannot. The child's father presses a copper into the physician's palm. Both pretend it is payment enough. Remedies are measured in pinches and prayers. A pouch of lavender, a thimble of fat, a whisper of Latin over a cup of hot water. These are the coins of healing now.
The village clings to them the way a drowning man clings to driftwood, knowing they may not float, but unable to let go.
The salve woman dips a splintered spoon into the cauldron. The pine resin glints amber in the firelight, thick as molten glass. She smears a dab on the cracked heel of a boy who has walked barefoot since his shoes split. The scent is sharp, medicinal, almost festive, like Christmas in a starving year. Keeps the rot out, she says, wrapping the foot in a rag torn from her own petticoat. The boy flexes his toes, eyes wide with the small miracle of warmth. At the riverbank, the wandering healer has drawn a circle of listeners. His jar of garlic honey is nearly empty. He tips the last golden thread into a girl's mouth, counting drops like a miser. A farmer scoffs, placebo and prayer, but his wife elbows him silent. She has seen the child's cough ease. The healer shrugs. Belief is a root that grows where nothing else will. You linger long enough to watch him tie a fresh pouch of crushed chamomile and lavender around a toddler's neck. The mother's fingers tremble as she knots the cord. The father presses a copper into the healer's palm, then another when the first is refused. The pouch swings like a tiny heart against the child's chest. By the hut, Agnes lifts the twice-boiled root tea to the light. It is the color of weak piss, but the young man cradles the cup as though it were mulled wine. Second brews mostly wish, she admits, but wishes keep the cramps at bay till morning. She has begun marking the jars with charcoal tallies, one line for every life the contents touch. Night settles. The pine salve fire dies to embers. The healer's mule plods away, sacks rubbed with wormwood and rue to foil desperate hands. In every cottage, a pouch hangs at a throat. A rag binds a heel, a cup cools on a sill. The remedies are thin, the faith thicker. Together, they form a fragile lattice between the village and the dark. The tide keeps its own counsel, rising slow and deliberate, as though testing how much more the village can bear. By the water's edge, the fishermen have built a small fire of driftwood and broken oars. The flames are low, blue at the heart, fed more by salt than heat. Sparks rise and die before they reach the stars. Old Watt, who once skippered the Swallow's Wing, sits on an upturned bucket, whittling a new thole pin from a scrap of yew. His knife is dull, the wood green, but he works with the patience of a man who has nothing left to waste. "Lost her off the head last Michaelmas," he says without looking up. "Storm came in faster than a bailiff. 1 minute the net was full, next minute the sea took the boat and the boys with it." He pauses, tests the pin against the light. "This'll fit the little Grace, if she ever sails again." Beside him, young Tom, barely 16, cheeks hollowed by hunger, coils a rope that has more knots than line. His fingers are raw, the skin split where the hemp has sawed through. Daw says the cod have gone north, or south, or deeper than nets can reach. His voice cracks on the last word. He swallows it like a fishbone. A girl, no more than 12, tends the fire. She feeds it slivers of tarred plank salvaged from a wreck. Her name is Meg, and her mother was the best net mender in the parish until the fever took her in the spring. Meg's hands move with the same sure rhythm, darning a tear in a sail that will never catch wind again. "If I finish this," she says to no one in particular, "maybe Grace will bring back herring." The sail is more whole than cloth. She stitches anyway. Further down the beach, the parish priest has come with his stole and a flask of holy water.
He blesses each boat in turn, his Latin stumbling over the wind. When he reaches the Hope's End, a hull half-stoved, ribs gaping like a carcass, he hesitates. The owner, a widower named Hal, stands beside it with his 3 remaining sons. Hal's hands are clenched so tight the knuckles gleam white. "Bless the wood, father," he says. "The boys'll breathe life back into her." The priest dips his fingers and flicks water across the splintered strakes. It hisses where it meets the fire's heat. The children have their own ritual. They've dragged a piece of fishing net across the sand and weighted it with stones. Inside the makeshift pen, they've placed a single dried sprat, a gift from a passing trader. They take turns guarding it, as though the fish might swim away. One boy, small enough to fit inside a barrel, whispers to the sprat, "Stay, we'll find you brothers." His voice is fierce with belief. Night deepens. The fire settles into embers. Watt finishes the thole pin and holds it up. It is crooked, but it will serve. Tom ties the last knot in the rope and slumps against a boat's hull. Meg folds the mended sail, still more whole than cloth, and tucks it beneath her arm like a sleeping child. Hal and his sons lift the Hope's End's broken mast, lashing it with willow withes. The priest closes his book. The children fall asleep around their netted sprat, dreams guarded by the sound of waves. The tide turns. It retreats, leaving the boats higher on the shingle, as though the sea itself has given up. But in the dark, the fishermen do not sleep. They listen to the wind, to the creak of timbers, to the small, stubborn heartbeat of hope that refuses to drown. The pier is a broken spine of oak and iron, beams flung across the sand like the ribs of some great sea beast. Salt crusts the splintered ends. Gulls perch on the highest timber, screaming at the wind. 3 sailors stand among the wreckage, cloaks snapping like torn sails. Jose, the eldest, kicks a warped plank. "She held against the French in 12, he says, voice raw. Now the sea takes her in a single night. His son, barely 20, kneels beside a cracked knee, the timber that once braced the pier's heart. "We lash it with what's left of the Swallow's mast," the boy offers. "Float her to Flanders, trade for rye." The 3rd sailor, a wiry man named Cole, spits into the foam. "Flanders has no rye, only rumors and empty quees."
They argue in gusts. North, south, stay, go. Each plan is a rope fraying in their hands. Behind them, the iron pot still simmers, seawater hissing down to a crust of salt no thicker than a communion wafer. The woman from the hut, Marta, once the salter's wife, lifts a wooden paddle crusted white. 3 hours for a thimble, she says. Enough to cure 1 fish if the gulls don't steal it first. She tips the precious grains into a cracked cup. They rattle like dice in a losing game. Children dart between the men's legs, baskets slung low. A girl no taller than a net float lifts a crab the size of a copper coin. Its claws pinch the air, too weak to snap. "For pottage," she whispers, eyes shining with the triumph of something caught. Her brother finds a mussel, pries it open with a shard of shell, and sucks the briny flesh. The taste is sharp, metallic, but he smiles as though it were oyster. The debate spirals. Jose wants to patch the little grace and risk the northern passage. Cole swears the coast is cursed. Every cog that leaves returns empty or not at all. The boy, Tomas, says nothing, only fingers the splintered knee, tracing the grain as though reading a map to somewhere else. Marta breaks the silence. Salt or no salt, the fish rot by noon. Decide, or we eat the boats. She gestures to the Hope's End, her hull stoved,
but still afloat on the high tide. The men fall quiet. The wind answers for them, howling through the pier's broken teeth.
Evening lowers. The children retreat with their baskets. 3 crabs, a handful of mussels, a single withered starfish. Marta banks the fire beneath the pot. The last of the seawater steams away, leaving a gray film of salt and despair. The sailors lift the cracked knee, lash it with rope salvaged from a drowned net. It will not hold a pier, but it might hold a dream. You turn from the shore. Behind you, the waves keep their counsel, crashing and retreating, giving nothing, taking everything. The village clings to the cliff's edge like a barnacle, stubborn, salt-bitten, alive for one more tide. The blanket is a patched thing of undyed wool, once thick, now threadbare from too many washings in cold water. From the upper window, it dangles like a white flag of surrender. The woman's voice cracks. "Beans will keep us alive till spring." The man's reply is lower, hoarse. "Spring may not come, and we'll freeze first." Their words drift down with the drip of laundry, swallowed by the street's clamor. Below, the soup stall steams weakly. A cauldron no larger than a baptismal font hangs over a sulky fire. The server, once a baker, now a city appointee, ladles gray water flecked with barley husks and a single shred of turnip. Each bowl is rationed by a notched stick. When the notch is reached, the ladle stops. A mother lifts her child so he can watch the measure. "See, enough for both of us," she lies, voice bright as cracked glass. The boy's eyes stay fixed on the pot long after his portion is gone.
At the corner, a cooper saws the staves from a cracked wine barrel. He will fashion them into clogs, wooden soles to keep feet from the mud. A queue forms, a tanner with a strip of hide for straps, a seamstress with thread unraveled from her own hem. Payment is bartered in slivers, half an onion, a twist of salt, a promise of tomorrow's soup. The cooper's hands tremble, the saw slips, nicking his thumb. He wraps it in a rag that was once a sleeve and keeps working. Further along, the bakehouse door is barred by 2 guards whose staves look heavier than their arms can manage. Inside, the oven glows dull red. The baker feeds it chair legs and a child's broken cradle. A ledger nailed to the wall lists each household's allotment. 1 fist-sized loaf per soul per day, sometimes less. A woman presses her tally mark with a charred stick, then waits while the loaf is weighed on a balance against a stone marked by the council. The stone wins. She tucks the short loaf beneath her shawl and hurries away before anyone notices the discrepancy. Children weave through the crowd like eels. One darts beneath a cart to retrieve a crust dropped in the scuffle. Another trades a bent nail for a peel of carrot. Their laughter is rare, sharp, quickly hushed. A boy no taller than the stall's counter offers a wooden spoon he has whittled smooth. "For stirring pottage," he says to a passing housewife. She hesitates, then presses a copper into his palm, more for the hope in his eyes than the spoon.
From an alley, the smell of boiling refuse rises. A tanner renders bones and hoof trimmings into a gelatinous stock. He skims the scum with a ladle made from a shoe sole, then pours the liquid into cracked cups. "Strength for the marrow," he claims. A queue forms here too, shorter, quieter, the drinkers avoiding each other's gaze. By dusk, the streets empty into a bruised twilight. Shutters close with the finality of coffin lids. The couple above has decided the blanket will go at dawn for a sack of beans that may or may not contain weevils. The soup cauldron is scraped clean. The cooper's last clog is bartered for a candle stub. Somewhere, a child hums the porridge story to a rag doll, voice fading as the cold seeps through the walls.
The town folds in on itself, a hive of small, desperate transactions. Hunger here is not the open wound of the countryside, but a slow, grinding pressure, stone on stone, heart against rib. Yet in every cracked cup, every whittled spoon, every whispered bargain, the same stubborn pulse persists. Tomorrow we will try again. The storehouse door groans shut behind you, sealing the damp air inside. A single lantern swings from a beam, throwing long shadows across the young man's face. His name is Willem, barely 20, once a cooper's apprentice. The rope around his wrists is loose enough to slip if he tried, but he sits as though bound by something heavier. "Just my dog," he repeats, voice frayed, "ran off after a rat near the granary."
I swear by the Virgin. The constable, a thick-set man with a face like old leather, leans against a sack of moldy peas. "Dogs don't open latches," he says, not unkindly, "nor leave boot prints in the flour." Outside, the crowd presses close to the cracked shutters. A woman clutches a shawl that might once have been Willem's mother's. Another mutters that the granary was already half empty. What difference does a handful make? A third hisses that thieves grow bold while honest folks starve. Their voices rise and fall like the lantern's flame. The officials under the awning have dispersed, leaving only a scatter of wax tablets and a broken quill. One plan remains pinned to the wall. Wooden tokens, each carved with a crude loaf, to be traded for bread at the bakehouse. The carver's knife lies beside it, blade nicked from overuse. No one has decided who will enforce the count or what happens when the tokens run out. In the alley, the musician packs his lute into a sack stitched from 3 different cloaks. The children's gifts, stone, string, flower, rest in his hat like relics. He lifts the hat to his heart, bows to the empty street, and slips away before the night watch can demand a license he no longer possesses. The salve woman locks her jar with a twist of rag. She has given away the last of the fat. Tomorrow she will render tallow from a dead cat if she must. Her hands, cracked and shining, flex once in the lantern light before she shutters her door.
Willem is let out at dusk. The constable cuts the rope but keeps a hand on the boy's shoulder. 3 days mucking the council's stables, he announces. Then we forget the dog. The crowd parts without cheering. A few nod, most simply turn away, stomachs louder than justice. Lanterns gutter along the crooked streets. A baby's cry threads through the walls, answered by a lullaby and a voice too tired to finish the verse. Somewhere, a pot scrapes empty. Somewhere, a token is whittled from a broken chair rung. The town folds into itself, a fist closing around its last scraps of bread and breath. You walk the narrowing lanes, boots splashing through puddles that reflect nothing but clouds. Behind every shutter a small drama plays, a blanket bartered, a song half sung, a thief forgiven or condemned by the width of a dog's paw. Hunger is the town's heartbeat now, steady, relentless, impossible to silence. Yet in the dark between the lanterns a child still hums the musician's tune, and the salve woman's jar will be full again by morning, if only with hope. The storehouse smells of rot and fear. A single shaft of light cuts through a cracked shutter and lands on Willem's boots, caked with the same mud that streaks the granary floor. The broken lock hangs from the post outside like a hanged man. Iron jaws sprung, hasp twisted. The constable, Giles, whose own belly growls beneath his leather jerkin, holds it up once more for the crowd to see, then sets it on a barrel with a clink that silences the whispers.
Willem's wrists are bound with soft rope.
the kind used for leading pigs to market. He keeps his gaze on the straw, counting strands as though they might spell innocence. "Dog bolted at dusk," he says again, voice hoarse. "Followed a rat scent to the granary. The door was already ajar." A lie, perhaps, or the truth worn thin by hunger. The woman who saw the shadow steps forward. Her name is Edith. Her child died of the flux last spring. Tall, cloak dark, moving as quick as a fox. Her eyes flick to Willem's height, then away. Another voice, older, rough. "I heard scratching at the latch near midnight." A third, a boy no older than Willem. "Saw no dog, but saw boots running." Giles rubs the bridge of his nose. "We've one lock broken, half a peck of barley spilled, and a village that can't spare either. I need truth, not tongues sharpened by empty bellies." He loosens the rope a finger's breadth. "Speak, lad. If the dog's real, name him. If not, name the hunger that drove you." Silence stretches, thick as the fog outside. Then a small hand tugs Giles's sleeve. A girl, 8 summers, offers a wooden whistle carved from an elder. "For Willem's dog," she whispers. "He whittled it last week, said it would call him home." The whistle is warm from her fist. Giles turns it over. The bore is stopped with a tuft of dog hair, black and white. The crowd stirs. Someone coughs. Edith's shoulders sag. "Could be any dog," she mutters, but doubt softens the accusation.
Giles exhales. 3 days mucking the Lord's stables. No whip, no stocks. And you'll mend the lock with your own hands. He cuts the rope. Willem rubs his wrists, eyes still on the floor. "After," Giles adds, "you'll eat with the rest of us at the bakehouse. Hunger's punished enough." Outside, the fog begins to lift. The broken lock is taken down. The post stands empty. Villagers drift away, some relieved, some unsatisfied. The girl presses the whistle into Willem's palm. He closes his fingers around it like a promise. The granary door will be repaired with scavenged iron. The spilled barley will be swept and boiled into gruel. Justice, like bread, is measured in crumbs now, but the village chews slowly and does not choke. The barn door hangs open like a broken jaw. Inside, 2 men circle a space no wider than a cartwheel, voices sharp as scythes. "I counted 6 sacks at dusk," the first growls, jabbing a finger at the empty corner. "5 at dawn." The accused, Thomas, whose wife miscarried last moon, stands rigid. "Your count's as crooked as your memory." Hay dust swirls between them, lit by a shaft of weak sun. The third man, older, shoulders aching from years at the plow, plants himself like a fence post. "Enough. We'll starve faster swinging fists than sharing blame."
A child peeks from behind her mother's skirt, thumb in mouth, eyes wide. The mother kneels. "Hunger makes monsters of us all," she whispers, "but it doesn't make us monsters." The girl nods, solemn, as though the lesson is a stone she must carry. At the communal oven, women move in a slow, watchful dance. Flour is weighed on a balance of river stones, each loaf shaped under 4 pairs of eyes. "No secrets in the dough," one says, forcing a smile that does not reach her eyes. The heat is fierce, but the glances are fiercer. A crust cracks. Someone flinches as though it were a bone. By the well, the night's phantom footsteps are retold in lowered voices. 3 circles, then nothing, a boy swears. His father hushes him, but checks the latch twice before bedding down. The constable, Giles, again, makes his rounds at twilight, lantern swinging like a slow heartbeat. At each door he pauses. Balls sound, lantern trimmed. To a trembling girl he adds, "No shadows tonight, little one. I'm the biggest one out here." His voice is gravel and honey. She clutches a rag doll and believes him. At the manor granary, the guard stands sentinel over sacks that sag like tired men. One, a father of 3, confesses in a whisper. "Gave my boy my rye crust. He smiled for the first time in a week. His spear does not waver, but his eyes do."
Night folds the village in its damp palm. Doors thud shut. Bolts slide home. A dog barks once, then thinks better of it. Somewhere, a woman sings a lullaby with no tune, only breath. Somewhere, a man counts potatoes that are no longer there. The constable's lantern bobs down the lane, a small, stubborn star against the dark. You close your own door, slide the bar, and listen. The village breathes, shallow, watchful, alive. Hunger has not broken it yet. It has only taught it new prayers. The peddler's donkey brays once, a cracked trumpet in the fog. He steadies the beast with a hand that trembles from cold or hunger, hard to tell. Around him the villagers form a loose crescent, breath fogging the air like incense. He lifts a bundle no larger than a loaf and unwraps it slowly. 3 dried apples, a twist of salt, a single copper coin blackened by sweat. "Trade for tales," he says, voice hoarse but practiced. "I've walked from Bruges to Bury. Listen closely." He begins with the southern port, a cog limping in on a torn sail, held heavy with rye from the Baltic. "The rats got half," he admits, "but the other half feeds a town for a fortnight." A woman clutches her shawl tighter. Her neighbor snorts. Rye turns to mold in a week of this damp. The peddler shrugs. "Mold's better than air." The young traveler pushes through, cheeks flushed from the road. "North of the river," he says, "Lord Baldwin gives seed, but you plow his domain first, dawn to dusk, no pay but the promise of spring." His eyes shine with the Lord's name. An elder spits. Promises rot faster than rye. At the chapel steps, the friar gathers children like a hen with chicks. His sandals are more whole than leather. Lanterns on every roof, he tells them, and the storm passed over like the angel of death. He traces a cross in the air. The children mimic him, small fingers trembling with awe. One girl tugs your sleeve. "Will lanterns save our cabbages?" You kneel. "They save the dark," you say. She considers this, then nods as though it is enough. On the crate, the loud man waves a staff whittled from a broken plow handle. "Fields of gold beyond the forest," he shouts. "Wheat so tall it hides a horse." Laughter ripples, thin but real. A boy whispers to his sister, "If we walk far enough, maybe we'll see it." She shushes him, but her eyes follow the horizon. The merchants bicker beside a cart with one wheel sunk in mud. "Bandits took my hen," one insists. "Shared their fire and gave it back plucked," the other counters. The crowd chuckles, grateful for the absurdity. A woman wipes her eyes with a corner of her apron. At least the hen had a story. The friar moves on, staff tapping the cobbles like a slow heartbeat. His voice drifts back. "Peccavimus, sed miserere." Sin and mercy braided tight. Behind him, the peddler trades an apple for a carved wooden bird. The donkey chews the wrapping cloth, patient as stone. Fog begins to lift. The village stirs, pockets fuller of rumor than grain. Somewhere, a door creaks open.
Somewhere, a child repeats the lantern story to a rag doll. The road stretches both ways, promising everything and nothing. The peddler shoulders his lighter pack, the friar his heavier one. By noon, they will be gone, leaving the village to chew on their words like crusts of bread. Stale, perhaps, but still something to swallow. The woman's fingers tremble as she lifts a single shoot between thumb and forefinger, as though it might dissolve like a dream. "Still green," she whispers, voice cracking on the word. Around her, others drop to their knees in the mud, parting the film of standing water with careful hands. The shoots are no taller than a child's finger, pale as candle wax, but they stand. A man laughs, a short, startled sound, then presses his forehead to the earth as if in prayer. Word spreads faster than the drying wind. Doors creak open, shutters bang. Children are lifted onto shoulders to see over the hedge. An old man who has not left his bench in a month shuffles forward on a stick, eyes wet. 3 nights. The monk said 3. No one corrects him. The sky above is a clear, impossible blue, cloudless for the first time in memory.
At the well, the prophecy teller stands vindicated, arms raised like a prophet. The young girl who tugged your sleeve now tugs his robe. "Will the bread grow too?" she asks. He kneels, suddenly unsure. "If the sun stays," he says, "everything grows." The peddler's donkey brays from the crossroads, sensing the shift. The carter who guarded his barrels now cracks one open, passing dried fish to outstretched hands. "For the miracle," he says, and no one argues the price. The friar's lanterns are unnecessary tonight. The moon hangs low and full, silvering the fields. In the manor yard, the guards lower their spears. One lifts his infant son to see the sky. "Remember this," he whispers, "the night the rain forgot." By twilight, the village is alive with small, careful sounds. The scrape of hose clearing drainage, the soft thud of seed potatoes counted into baskets, the murmur of plans spoken aloud for the first time in months. No one sings yet. Joy is still too fragile. But the silence is different now, not the heavy hush of dread, but the held breath before a first step. You stand at the field's edge. The shoots sway in a breeze that smells of turned earth and distant thaw. Somewhere a child laughs. The sound is as bright as breaking glass. The famine has not ended. The stores are still thin. The winter still long. But tonight the world has cracked open just enough to let a sliver of tomorrow in.
The sky keeps its counsel. No one dares name the change aloud, but the village breathes it in like a secret. At the rise, the wind combs through the grass with a dry rustle, no longer the wet slap of weeks past. Below, a woman lifts her washing from a line and finds it stiff instead of sodden. She holds a child's smock to her face, inhaling the faint scent of sun, and her shoulders shake with something between laughter and tears. In the chapel yard, the circle tightens. The priest's lips move silently. A boy beside him traces the shape of a cloud with one finger, as though testing whether it will vanish if touched. No one speaks of miracles. They speak of tomorrow's bread, of seed that might not rot, of a river that no longer gnaws the bank like a starving dog. The steward closes his ledger without marking a single debt. He watches a girl chase a chicken across the yard, the bird's wings scattering droplets that catch the last light like scattered coins. 3 days, he says to no one. 3 dry days and we plant the rye. His voice is soft, almost afraid to disturb the air. Near the forest, the birds grow bolder. A thrush lands on a low branch, tilts its head, and sings a phrase so clear it startles a man into dropping his hoe. He does not stoop to retrieve it.
He stands listening until the song ends, then wipes his eyes with the heel of his hand and laughs, a short, rusty sound that carries across the clearing. At the well, the water runs clear enough to see the pebbles at the bottom. A woman fills her jug and pauses, watching her reflection waver. "My mother's face," she murmurs, surprised. The others nod, understanding without words. Night falls clean. The first star appears, sharp as a nail in dark wood. Doors remain unbarred a little longer. Children are called in only when the chill bites. Fires burn steady, no longer hissing against wet fuel. Somewhere a lullaby rises, tentative, then stronger, as though the singer has remembered the tune. You sit on the stone until the dark is complete. The village below is a scatter of small, steady lights. No lanterns on rooftops yet, but no shutters slammed against storms either. The air smells of earth beginning to remember itself. No one says the famine is over. They say only, tomorrow we plant. And in that small, unspoken verb, the world tilts a fraction toward morning. The girl's basket is woven from last year's rushes, the rim frayed where her fingers grip too tightly. She counts out 3 beans into a woman's calloused palm, no more, no less, then moves to the next furrow. "For luck," she whispers each time, as though the words might root alongside the seed. The woman nods, eyes on the child's small, steady hands rather than the sky.
Behind her, the boy balances his basket of stones on one hip. Each shard of pottery he lifts is a promise. This will not bruise the plow. This will not choke the chute. He hums under his breath, a tune with no name, the kind children invent when the world is too heavy for borrowed songs. In the manor field, the steward's scoop clinks against the barrel's rim. 1 measure of rye, 1 of barley, a pinch of beans no larger than a sparrow's heart. He marks each portion with a notch on a hazel twig, then hands it over without ceremony. The line moves slowly. No one jostles. A man accepts his share, weighs it in his palm, and tucks it inside his shirt next to his skin, as though warmth might coax it into sprouting. Further along, the debate continues in murmurs. "Plant now, the ground's thirsty," says one, pressing a boot into the soil until it holds the shape. "Wait another day," counters another, pointing to a patch still gleaming with trapped water. They compromise without deciding. Half the field sown today, half tomorrow. The earth accepts both choices with the same damp silence. A woman kneels alone at the field's edge, pressing a single pea into the soil with her thumb. She covers it, pats the mound, then rests her forehead against the cool earth for a breath. When she rises, her knees are streaked with mud like war paint. She does not wipe it away.
Children dart between the rows, marking planted spots with sticks whittled to points. One boy drives his stick too deep and strikes something hard, an old horseshoe, rusted but whole. He lifts it triumphantly. "For the plow!" he shouts. The adults pause, then laugh, the sound brittle but real, scattering across the field like seed. By noon the sun climbs higher, thin but insistent. Shirts cling to backs with sweat instead of rain. A girl discovers a worm in her handful of soil and holds it up to the light, delighted by its blind, wriggling life. "The ground remembers," she says. No one corrects her. The steward closes the seed barrel with a soft thud. The remaining grain rattles like dice in a cup. Enough for one more field, maybe 2. He ties the lid with twine, then stands a moment, listening to the scrape of hoes,
The murmur of voices, the small, steady heartbeat of the village, beginning again. At the rise, you watch the field transform. Dark lines of turned earth, pale scatter of seed, the slow, deliberate dance of people who have nothing left to lose but the will to try. The sky holds its breath with them, cloudless, vast, almost kind. The square is already crowded when you reach it, not with the tight knots of suspicion that marked the worst weeks, but with the loose, purposeful press of people who have work to do and believe it might matter.
At the center stands the steward, ledger open on a barrel. Beside him, a boy balances a sack of rye on his shoulder, counting aloud as the steward notches his tally stick. The line is orderly, almost festive. A woman at the front receives her portion, 3 measures, no more, then turns to the man behind her and splits 1 measure between his cupped hands. No one protests. The gesture ripples down the queue like a quiet hymn. Near the well, children play a new game. They drop pebbles into the bucket and race to see whose splash reaches the highest. The water is clear enough to show the stone's colors: gray, rose, a single fleck of quartz. A girl lifts a pebble to the light, squints, and declares it a dragon's tooth. Her brother pockets it solemnly. No one tells them to stop. In the lane, a cooper fits new staves into a barrel that will hold seed, not ale. His apprentice, barely 12, hums the harvest song from 3 summers past, the one with the nonsense chorus about geese and golden grain. The tune is off-key but stubborn, and it catches. By the time you pass the bakehouse, 3 women are humming it while they knead the last of the rye into loaves no larger than a fist. The oven's heat steadies the notes.
At the field's edge, the ash-streaked furrows have darkened overnight, drinking the pale sun. A man walks the rows with a switch, flicking away the first brave slugs. He pauses to press a seed between thumb and soil, testing its depth the way a mother tests a child's fevered brow. "Deep enough to dream," he mutters, satisfied. A girl, the same who carried the seed basket yesterday, now carries a smaller one filled with water. She moves between the workers, offering sips from a wooden cup. When she reaches the elders on the wall, the older man takes the cup with both hands, drinks, then pours a drop onto the ground. "For the thirsty ones below," he says. The girl nods as though this is the most natural thing in the world. By noon, the sky is a washed blue, cloudless but for a single hawk circling high. Someone has tied a strip of red cloth to the chapel weathercock. It snaps in the breeze like a banner no one remembers raising. Children chase its shadow across the square, shrieking with laughter that no longer sounds borrowed. The steward closes his ledger. The last sack is empty, the last notch cut. He lifts the tally stick high so all can see, then breaks it across his knee. The crack is sharp, final, and somehow joyous. "Enough," he says. "Enough for now." The crowd does not cheer. They exhale, a long shared breath that stirs the dust at their feet. You walk to the ridge. The fields lie striped in pale green and dark earth, the drainage trenches glinting like silver threads. A woman stands at the forest edge, arms full of kindling that is finally truly dry. She looks up, meets your eye, and smiles, small, crooked, but real. Tonight the village will eat rye bread no thicker than a finger and drink water that tastes of stone and sun. They will sleep with the windows cracked open, listening for the soft rustle of growing things. The famine has not ended. The stores are still thin, the winter still a shadow on the horizon. But the earth has answered, and the answer is yes. The men's voices rise and fall like the hammer on the anvil.
One sketches a route in the dust with a stick, 3 days to the river crossing, 2 more to the market at St. Edmunds. Another shakes his head, pointing to a stretch still marked by a puddle the size of a cartwheel. Wait 1 more sun, he says, boots before bread. They compromise without heat. 2 scouts will leave at dawn, carrying repaired scythes and a promise of mint and sorrel in exchange for whatever grain the next village can spare. At the sharing circle, the women have formed a ring no wider than a hearth rug. Each places her offering in the center, a fist of barley, 3 beans, a twist of dried nettle. The eldest lifts a wooden bowl, pours the mingled seeds, and stirs once with her finger. Equal shares, she declares, and the bowl passes hand to hand. No one counts. The circle itself is the measure. A girl watches from the edge, clutching a single pea. When the bowl reaches her mother, the woman breaks the pea in half and drops 1 piece in. The girl's eyes widen. She tucks the remaining half into her pocket like a secret. The blacksmith sets the blade aside and lifts a hoe, newly edged with iron salvaged from a broken plowshare. First request in a month, he says, voice rough with something like pride, for turning soil, not stomachs. He tests the edge with his thumb, nods, and wraps the handle in twine softened by tallow. The customer, a boy no older than the apprentice, takes it with both hands as though receiving a relic. Children have claimed the rain barrel as a stage. One stands atop it, arms wide, reciting the Dragon's Tooth Pebble saga to an audience of 3. The mother, with the warm bread, breaks off a corner for each listener. The bread is dark, dense, but it steams when torn, and the children chew slowly, eyes closed, as though tasting memory. At the herb stall, the woman ties a bundle of mint with a strand of red wool. For the blacksmith's wife, she says, her cough lingers. She refuses payment, only asks that the wool be returned when the mint is gone. The blacksmith's apprentice takes the bundle, tucks it inside his shirt, and runs. The market does not bustle, it breathes. A woman trades a mended shoe for 2 spoons. A man swaps a carved whistle for a handful of ash. The cooper rolls his repaired barrel past the sharing circle, pausing to let the women test its soundness with a knuckle rap. It rings true. Someone laughs, a full, unguarded sound that startles a sparrow from the eaves. By noon, the sun climbs higher, thin but steady. The stalls begin to fold, not from defeat, but from completion. The blacksmith banks his fire with a shovelful of ash from the sharing circle. The herb woman counts her remaining bundles, 7, and smiles at the number. The scouts shoulder their packs, scythes gleaming like promises. You linger at the square's edge. The dust bears the faint imprint of many feet, all moving in the same direction, forward. The air smells of mint, warm bread, and the faint iron tang of possibility. No one speaks of abundance. They speak of enough. And for today, enough is a feast. The river slides past like a thief who has taken what he came for and now moves on, quieter, almost polite. The gouges in the bank are raw, pale clay streaked with darker earth where the flood scraped deep. The man, once a basket weaver, now a keeper of ghosts, runs a hand along a severed root. It is thick as his wrist, snapped clean. 3 generations of witches, he says, gone in a night. He does not look at the water.
He looks at the space where the willows should be. Further downstream, a child balances on a half-submerged log, poking the mud with a stick. Each prod releases a bubble of trapped air that smells of rot and iron. She finds a shard of pottery, blue glaze, the rim of a bowl, and holds it up to the light. "Someone ate soup here," she announces. Her mother, mending a net on the bank, does not correct her. The shard is slipped into a pocket with the same care once given to silver. You follow the old field boundary, now a shallow trench filled with silt. A row of boundary stones leans drunkenly, half buried. One has toppled completely. Its face, carved with a crude cross, stares at the sky. A woman kneels beside it, pressing a clump of grass into the hollow where the stone once stood. "To hold the memory," she says. "The land forgets faster than we do."
At the edge of the drowned meadow, a single apple tree remains. Its lower branches are bleached white, bark peeled away in strips by the flood. Yet higher up, a cluster of leaves, small, pale, defiant, clings to life. A boy shins up the trunk, sawed-off branches in hand, and ties a strip of red wool around the highest twig he can reach. "For the tree's heart," he calls down. His father, patching a fence below, nods without looking up. The wool flutters like a small, stubborn flag. The churchyard tells its own story. Fresh mounds, no stones yet, mark the places where the weakest were laid. Between them, early nettles push through the soil, vivid green against the darker earth. A woman weeds around one mound with a broken knife, humming under her breath. She pauses to tuck a sprig of mint into the soil. "For the breath," she whispers. The mint will spread, the mound will settle. Both are true. You walk the old road to the coast, now a raised causeway of packed mud and stone. Wheel ruts from heavier times are filled with water that reflects the sky. A heron stands in one, motionless, as though waiting for the world to finish changing. Along the verge, fragments of broken carts lie half buried. A wheel rim, a spoke, the iron tire of a wagon that never reached market. A man salvages the tire, rolling it ahead of him like a hoop. "For the smith," he says. "He'll make a plowshare." The heron lifts off, slow wings beating the air into ripples. By twilight, you return to the river. The man is still there, shaping a new basket from green hazel he has cut from higher ground. His fingers move with the old rhythm, but slower. He tests the weave, finds its sound, and sets it aside. "One basket," he says, "for the first peas, if they come." He does not say when. The river murmurs past, carrying away the last of the silt, leaving the banks a little cleaner, a little barer, a little more honest. The scars remain, gouges, bleached branches, empty spaces where willows once bent in the wind. But the land is learning new shapes, and the people are learning to read them. From the rise, the village looks like a quilt, pieced from old grief and new stitches. The granary roof is patched with pale reeds where the old thatch washed away. The color is wrong, but the seams hold. Below, a boy drags a broken gate across the lane, repurposing it into a fence for the pea rows. The gate's iron hinge squeals once, then settles into its new duty. The heavy land lies dark and sullen, a bruise on the earth's cheek. The woman stands at its edge, arms still folded, but now she holds a small bundle of willow slips. She will plant them along the boundary, not for baskets, but for roots to bind the soil. "Let the river take the willows," she says, "but not the field." Her voice is steady again. The tremor has been folded into resolve.
In the copse, the moss-heavy branches droop like mourning veils. Someone has cleared a small circle at the center and set a single stone there. No carving, just a river pebble worn smooth. A child's wooden horse stands beside it, propped upright with a twig. The clearing is silent, but it is no longer empty. It has become a place to sit and remember without speaking. The pond mirrors the sky's pale recovery. A frog launches from the silt bank, lands with a soft plop, and vanishes. The reeds are thin, but they are there. A woman wades knee-deep, cutting the tallest for thatch. She works slowly, testing each stalk for strength. Roofs first, she says, then the rest. The footpaths fade under new grass, but their ghosts remain in the way people walk. Heads down, eyes tracing the old roots. The woman who lost her sister pauses at a fork, touches the place where the path splits, then chooses the lane home. She carries a basket of kindling. The weight is light, but it is hers. From the rise, you see the whole scarred map. The leaning trees, the patched roofs, the thin green lines of new shoots. Smoke rises straight now, no longer flattened by rain. A dog barks once, sharp and certain. Somewhere a hammer rings against iron, steady as a heartbeat. The land is wounded, but it is not dead. The village is thinner, quieter, but it is not gone. The scars will shape the stories told to children who will never know the weight of the flood. And in the meantime, the earth turns, the seeds sleep, and the people walk the paths they have left, carrying the past in their pockets like smooth stones. The forge glows like a small, steady heart. The blacksmith, once hollow-eyed, now merely tired, lifts a plowshare from the coals. Its edge is bright orange, the color of dawn. He quenches it in a barrel of river water. Steam hisses up in a white plume, carrying the scent of hot iron and hope. First real blade in a year, he says, testing the edge with a calloused thumb. For the heavy land. He does not say if, he says when. At the furrows, the woman still kneels. The sprouts are no taller than a fingernail, but she has counted them. 7 in her row alone. She marks each with a twig, a small cross against birds and frost. A boy watches, then kneels beside her and presses a pebble into the soil beside the weakest shot. For strength, he says. She does not correct him. By the river, the children's pebbles plunk in steady rhythm. The reeds are pale green at the tips, stubborn as the boy's dream of baskets. His mother's smile widens a fraction, then steadies. She lifts a reed, tests its flex, and tucks it behind her ear like a promise.
The elders pause at the field's edge. One leans on his stick and points to a patch where the soil is darkest. There, he says, my father sowed rye after the great frost. It took 3 years, but it came. The others nod, remembering. Their sticks tap the earth in quiet agreement. In the square, the baker pulls another loaf from the oven. It is small, dark, flecked with herbs, but it steams. He breaks it in half, hands one piece to the blacksmith's apprentice, the other to the woman with the reed in her hair. They eat standing, crumbs falling like small blessings. The blacksmith banks his fire with a shovelful of ash from the baker's hearth. The ash is gray, but it is dry. He watches the sprouts from his doorway, plowshare cooling beside him. Tomorrow, he says to no one, we turn the heavy land. The village moves in small, deliberate motions.
a seed counted, a pebble placed, a reed tested, a loaf shared. The mosaic builds, piece by careful piece. The famine is not gone. It lingers in thin arms and patched roofs. But the land has begun to speak again, and the people have begun to listen. The lanterns are small, made from horn and tallow, but they burn clear. One by one they appear at cottage doors, along the chapel wall, above the forge where the smith has left his fire banked low. Each flame is a quiet declaration. We are still here.
A boy carries a lantern on a stick, swinging it like a censer. The light arcs across the square, catching the faces of those who linger. The baker wiping flour from his hands, the shepherd leaning on his staff, the woman with the reed still tucked behind her ear. They do not speak much. Words feel too heavy for the softness of the evening. Instead, they nod, or lift a hand, or simply stand in the circle of light and let it rest on their shoulders. The apprentice from the forge sits on the well's rim, turning the new plowshare in his lap. The iron is cool now, but it holds the day's heat in memory. He traces the edge with a finger, then looks up at the sky. "Stars," he says, surprised, as though seeing them for the first time. A girl joins him, holding the wooden horse she found in the ruined shelter. She has cleaned it with the corner of her apron. The uneven legs still wobble, but the grain of the wood shines. She sets it on the well's stone lip beside the plowshare. "For the heavy land," she says. The apprentice nods solemnly. Together they watch the lanterns multiply until the square is a small constellation. From the chapel comes the low sound of voices. Not hymn, but a murmur of names. The priest stands in the doorway, lantern in hand, calling each villager by the name of someone they have lost. Not in mourning now, but in roll call. "Present," the living answer with a breath, a touch to the heart, a tear that does not fall. The names settle into the night like seeds. You sit on the bench, the wood warm from the day's sun. The wind lifts the scent of bread, of forge smoke, of sheep, and turns earth. A dog curls at your feet, sighs, and sleeps. Somewhere, a child laughs, soft, testing the air. The sound does not startle the dark. It belongs to it. The lanterns burn lower. One by one they are carried inside, leaving the square to the moon and the slow turning of the stars. The plowshare and the wooden horse remain on the well's edge, guardians of the night. Tomorrow, the heavy land will be turned. Tomorrow, the sprouts will stretch a fraction taller. Tomorrow, the village will wake and find the world still holding its breath, gentle, steady, alive. Tonight, the lanterns sleep, the village sleeps, and in the quiet between heartbeats, hope, small, warm, undeniable, keeps watch. The broth lingers on your tongue, nettle and barley, a whisper of salt. You pass the spoon back with a nod that says more than thanks. The woman's smile folds into the dark as she moves on, pot swinging gently at her side. The lanterns dim to embers. One by one the cottage doors ease shut, leaving only the low glow behind shutters and the soft creak of settling beams. A dog sighs in its sleep. Somewhere a child murmurs a single word, "Mama," and is answered by the rustle of a blanket.
You stand at the field's edge. The sprouts are invisible in the starlight, but you know where they lie. 7 in the woman's row, 3 where the boy pressed his pebble, countless others tucked beneath the soil's dark blanket. The breeze lifts the scent of turned earth and distant water, cool but no longer cruel. It brushes your cheek like a hand that has learned gentleness. The river sings its quiet song, no longer a roar, only a lullaby. The stars burn steady, small fires that ask nothing. You breathe in the night, breathe out the day. The weight of gouged banks, drowned fields, empty clearings, it lifts, not gone, but lightened, carried off by the same wind that rocks the reeds. Inside the cottages, families breathe in slow unison. The blacksmith's hammer is silent, but its echo lingers in the curve of the new plowshare. The baker's oven cools, holding the memory of steam. The shepherd's lamb sleeps against its mother's side, tail twitching in dreams of green grass. You walk the path home. The ground is firm beneath your boots, the mud dried to a soft give. At your door, the last lantern waits, its flame low but unbroken. You cup your hands around it, carry it inside, set it on the table where its light pools gold across the worn wood. The fire settles into coals. You sit, shoulders loose, the broth's warmth still curled in your chest. Outside, the village sleeps, beneath a sky washed clean. The sprouts sleep. The river sleeps. The scars sleep, but they no longer ache. Sweet dreams.